Chapter 579. When the sword light slashed over, Gao Ruowang was caught off guard. He didn't expect Zhang Yan to be able to pinpoint his location among the hundreds of blood spirits. Luckily, he cherished his life more than anyone else. When he was fighting with Qin Qingping from an Ata temple, he didn't even expose his true body. He paid special attention to his own defense, and he had 3 life-protecting blood banners on him. When the sword light slashed down, the blood banners were activated in time and he hid within them. He used the flag as a substitute for death and escaped. His reaction was extremely fast. Without waiting for the sword light to turn around and slash at him again, he had already escaped from the banners. His body shook and turned into a dozen blood spirits that scattered in all directions. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. He sharply noticed that although Gao Ruowang reacted in time, he was in a sorry state when he dodged. He didn't create many blood spirits in his haste. This was a great opportunity for him to chase after him with his sword and attack fiercely. Thus, he waved his sleeves, and a dozen bolts of purple cloud divine lightning struck at each of the blood spirits. A series of thunderous sounds rang out, and the dozen blood spirits were blown up in the air. Only one of them suddenly dodged to the side, and it was obvious that it was where its true body was. Zhang Yan recognized where the true body was, and his eyes became sharper. The sword pill moved according to his thoughts, and it turned into a rainbow as it flew over in an instant. When experts fought, life and death could be decided in a split second. Gao Ruowang knew that he had made a mistake and revealed a flaw. Now, he would have to face Zhang Yan's storm-like attacks. If he made even the slightest mistake, then he would definitely be defeated and killed. So, he immediately let out a loud shout and used all his strength to speed up the escape light. The blood-red light in the sky actually flew over 100 zhang away, and actually managed to reach a distance of 1,000 zhang away before the sword light arrived. Zhang Yan shouted and merged with his sword. He turned into a rainbow and flew up. In just a moment, he had already caught up to Gao Ruowang. Gao Ruowang didn't wait for him to slash. He repeated his old trick. His body trembled, and he turned into a dozen blood spirits that fled in different directions. Suddenly, there was a loud thunder in the sky, and most of the blood spirits were blown away. Only one of them flashed over, and it looked towards the north. Zhang Yan's mind raced. Based on the current situation, he would have to spend a few hours to sharpen his skills. He knew that he would not be able to kill this person, and in the end, he would have used up a lot of Fa Li. If another enemy appeared, it would be difficult to deal with. Thus, he withdrew his sword light and did not pursue. He thought to himself, this person isn't slow either. He's not much slower than me. He also has the blood clone to confuse the senses. If he didn't have the heaven and earth lock technique, I would have the upper hand. Looks like I can only lure it over and try using that move. Gao Ruowang escaped from the sword light and flew for several miles. When he was far away in the sky, he stopped and made a hand sign. More than 100 blood souls appeared around him. Only then did he calm down. Thinking back to the situation just now, he felt a lingering fear. He thought to himself, this Zhang Yan's Fa Li is similar to mine, and his movement technique is better than mine. Since I can't gain an advantage in these 2 areas, then I can only try to win in terms of Dao techniques. When cultivators fought with their enemies, they would play to their strengths and avoid their weaknesses. He felt that with his hundreds of years of cultivation, in terms of using spells, he would be able to suppress Zhang Yan. He took out a pale white shield from his sleeves. It was slightly thinner in the middle, and the 2 ends were wide. There was an evil ghost face on it, and the face sometimes cried and sometimes laughed, like it was alive. He pointed at it, and the ghost head on the shield gave out a shrill cry, begging for mercy. Gao Ruowang laughed coldly and took out the shield in the air. Immediately, a pale white mist fell down and covered his body. This talisman was called the Corpse Skin Smiling Face Shield. It was a Xian weapon given to him by the elders of his sect. It was originally made from the skin of more than 1,000 cultivators and refined with the secret technique of the Blood Soul sect. Thus, it was extremely fierce. Every time he used it, he had to teach it a lesson to make it obedient. Thus, he rarely used it. Now that he was going to compete with Zhang Yan in terms of spells, he took it out to protect himself. After he was done, he waved his sleeves and rode the wind forward. Zhang Yan had the same idea as Gao Ruowang, so he didn't force him. He first kept the sword light beside him, and with a thought, a golden light appeared. The heaven and earth leaf flew out and hovered above his head. He also stepped on the cloud and floated forward. The two of them approached each other slowly. Not long after, they were within 100 feet of each other and both stopped. Gao Ruowang focused his gaze and saw that the cloud above Zhang Yan's head was glowing with 5 colors, and the water under his feet was glistening, rippling, and flashing, as if it would turn into a stormy sea in the next moment. He thought to himself, if I want to take this person down, I have to break this technique first. Most of his offensive spells were based on the blood souls, but the existence of the water was an obstacle in front of him. Thus, he had to find a way to solve it first. With a thought, dozens of blood souls shot out from his side like arrows, all of them pouncing towards Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan didn't dodge and commanded the sword light to fly over, killing more than 10 blood souls in a row. There were only 3 or 4 fish that escaped the net, and they were still rushing inside. Suddenly, there was the sound of waves, and before they could get within 100 feet, they were swept away by the water element True Light. Gao Ruowang saw that he was heavily guarded, and the door was extremely tight. His expression became solemn, and he silently observed. The blood souls that were absorbed into the blood souls only sensed a little, and after a short while, they were completely cut off from his mind. At this time, he knew that when the blood souls were absorbed, Zhang Yan couldn't kill them immediately, and needed some time to dissolve them. He thought to himself, with Zhang Yan's mana, this technique must have a limit, and I need to use a secret technique to break it. The techniques of the blood soul sect were divided into upper, middle, and lower methods. The lower method couldn't capture demonic cultivators and refine them into blood souls. The lower method could only devour flesh, bones, skin, and blood, and it seemed that the lower generation cultivators were all like this. The middle method could refine the blood souls according to one's own thoughts, and use them for all kinds of unimaginable purposes. As for the upper method, it broke away from this path, and it was no longer restricted by these external objects. It only needed to use mana, and it could give birth to blood souls. Moreover, it would be compatible with one's own soul, and it could gather and disperse at will. At this stage, if all the blood souls were not destroyed, it would be impossible to kill them. That was why when Jinren Ruhuang wreaked havoc in Donghua, he needed 6 grotto heavens to surround and attack him. Gao Ruowang was in the second realm of Yuanying, and only then did he get the middle method, and he could carry thousands of blood souls. Many of them were refined by him, and they had some magical uses. After thinking about it a few times, he came up with a plan to deal with the enemy. While he was thinking, Zhang Yan didn't just sit around, but he was circulating his technique, and his qi gathered above his head. He gradually moved the high cloud, and he was ready to go. This time, he didn't plan to use the flying sword as the main attack. Otherwise, even if he had the upper hand, it would just be a repeat of the stalemate just now. This was not what he wanted, so this time, he prepared to fight head-on with his supernatural powers. Gao Ruowang made a gesture, and the 3 high cloud above his head suddenly trembled. Countless balls of light red smoke shot out, and when they reached far away, they all shattered, and turned into scarlet clouds that floated in all directions. They were all the size of bowls, and just by looking, there were tens of thousands of them. With the 2 of them as the center, the 5 miles radius was filled with these things. Of course, Zhang Yan wouldn't allow him to lay out his spells so easily. He made a hand seal and cast a spell. As the high cloud trembled, several bolts of lightning flashed through the sky, traversing a distance of 1,000 feet and striking toward the great enemy in front of him. At the same time, he waved his sleeve, and 100 bolts of strong thunder were released to disperse the colorful clouds. At this moment, there was a flying mountain that floated into the battlefield, and after being struck by his strong thunder, half of the mountain collapsed, and the sound was loud. Gao Ruowang saw that there weren't many bolts of lightning, so he decided not to dodge. He shook his shoulder lightly, and with a boom, hundreds of purplish-red blood spirits flew out, and split into two groups, and flanked from the side. As soon as he finished doing this, he heard a few explosions on the human skin shield, and the grayish-white fog that covered him seemed to be breaking apart. He couldn't help but be shocked. The power of the purple heaven thunder was much greater than he had imagined. Luckily, it was only a few bolts. If dozens of bolts were to strike at him at the same time, he would have to think of a way to avoid it. The sword pill beside Zhang Yan sensed the threat, and with a sword sound, it went up to meet the attack. Under Gao Ruowang's control, the blood spirits split again, and 30 blood spirits flew out, and took the initiative to meet the sword pill. When the sword gleam hit it, it was like hitting metal, and it made a clanging sound, but it couldn't be broken in one hit. With this cover, the purplish-red blood spirits were no longer blocked in front of them, and they pounced forward. When they were just 100 feet away, they saw waves rolling in front of them, as if they were hitting the shore, and just by rushing up, they drowned all the blood spirits that were attacking. These hundreds of blood spirits were fused with the blood poison technique, and not only did this poison have the ability to pollute spiritual vigor, every bit of poison aura was as heavy as lead. It was originally refined by Gao Ruowang to deal with the Xianmen magical treasure, but now it was used by him to deal with the water element true light. Gao Ruowang stared at it intently. Actually, he didn't have full confidence in this move, and he had already thought about it. If this method didn't work, then he could only completely give up on the idea of defeating this person, and use his escape technique to deal with him. After dragging it out for a few hours, he would wait for Feng Haiyang to arrive, and then attack together. His eyesight was considered good, and he realized that after absorbing the blood spirits, the water light seemed to have slowed down a little. Although it wasn't obvious, it was obviously useful. He couldn't help but feel happy, and knew that his judgment was not wrong. He secretly sneered, "You can easily take a few tens of blood spirits, but what about 100, or 1,000? Even if Zhang Yan's Dao technique was strange, and it was not afraid of polluted spiritual qi, but once there were a lot of blood spirits, it would not be easy to suppress them. When the time came, he could use his best Dao technique to kill his opponent." Thinking about this, Gao Ruowang's spirit doubled, and his movements were not slow. First, he drove the surrounding colorful clouds to the center, and then he continuously sent out blood spirits, and occasionally threw out Yin thunder, and started to attack Zhang Yan. Because he was afraid that Zhang Yan would see through his plan, he didn't dare to send out too many at once, but at least a dozen, and at most 100. Fortunately, Zhang Yan seemed to be unaware of it, and no matter how many blood spirits came, as long as the sword net could not block them, he would use the water element true light to collect them all. After a moment, Gao Ruowang had already thrown more than 1,000 blood souls into it. When he looked at it again, even though the torrential tide was still powerful, it was already a little sluggish. It was as if it had been mixed with millions of tons of sand and mud, and it was a little motionless. Chapter 580. Just now, while Gao Ruowang was attacking fiercely, Zhang Yan had already used the water light as a cover to secretly split the 20 sword lights out. They hid far away behind the flying peaks that filled the sky, waiting for an opportunity to attack. This technique was created by him based on the heaven and earth sealing technique of the third-grade Yuanyin cultivators. The strength of this technique was that it used the speed of the sword lights. If a cultivator tried to escape, as long as he was blocked by a sword light, all the sword lights would attack him from all directions, making it impossible for him to hide. However, this technique was after all sealed with sword lights, so there were still many flaws. It did not really seal the heaven and earth. If the opponent had a treasure to protect himself, he might be able to break out by paying a small price. Just now, Zhang Yan saw that Gao Ruowang dodged his own sword light slash. It was very mysterious, and it was obvious that his protection technique was extraordinary. Thus, he pondered and felt that the only way was to break this technique before he could attack again. Gao Ruowang tried to break his water element true light a few times. After some serious consideration, Zhang Yan decided to beat him at his own game. He stopped using this Taoist technique and found a way to lure Gao Ruowang to take the bait. Gao Ruowang saw that the water light had already slowed down, but he was still secretly vigilant. He was not in a hurry to rush forward, but with a shake of his body, dozens of blood souls went forward to test it. A thought arose in Zhang Yan's mind, and the sword orb flew over in response. A horizontal light flashed, and with a flash, it slashed more than half of the blood souls that assaulted him into pieces. The remaining blood souls collided with the golden curtain of light of the universe leaf and shattered into pieces, unable to be shaken in the slightest. These blood souls were only ordinary. If they were like the ones from before, which could pollute magic treasures, he would not use the heaven and earth leaf to block them. He would most likely use the purple heaven thunder. The two of them fought for a while. Zhang Yan saw that Gao Ruowang was still patrolling outside and did not use his trump card. He could not help but secretly nod. This person was worthy of being a disciple of the devil's doctrine. He was actually able to hold back and not make a move at this moment. He was indeed not simple. He changed his mind and realized that he couldn't just be on the defensive all the time. This would easily arouse the opponent's suspicions, so he had to find a way to force the opponent. As soon as this thought crossed his mind, he activated his Xian Qi and a yellow light shot out from the high cloud above his head. Suddenly, it transformed into a large Xian Huang hand and rose up with a rumbling sound. After a distance of 10,000 feet, the 5 fingers closed and grabbed a piece of rock and threw it down. This mountain was at least 100 zhang tall, and it was also a colossus. When the dozens of blood souls smashed into it, they only caused the grass and trees to wither and the flowers and trees to wither. However, it was useless against the sturdy mountain and hard rocks. They had no choice but to scatter to the left and right. Gao Ruowang was startled. He sneered and also used a spell. A blood-red hand appeared above his head and slapped the mountain back. Zhang Yan waved his sleeves and immediately, several thunderbolts burst out. How could this flying mountain withstand such a Dao technique? It immediately collapsed into countless gravel and mud and drifted in all directions. The large Xian Huang hand above his head did not stop. It slapped in the air and slapped another flying mountain. The flying mountains here were thousands of feet wide, and the small ones were tens of zhang. He did not know how many there were. With a wave of his hand, one of them flew away. In just a moment, there were more than 10 mountains that crashed into the opposite side. If there were more mountains, although Gao Ruowang was not afraid, it would be troublesome to sweep them up. He did not want to waste his Fa Li for nothing, so he used his escape technique to dodge. Zhang Yan took out a porcelain bottle from his sleeve and pulled out the stopper. He threw it into the water light under his feet. No one knew what he threw in. While Gao Ruowang was flying, he saw his actions. He could not help but be shocked. He immediately guessed that this was Zhang Yan trying to break his thousands of blood spirits so that the water light could be used again. He initially thought that even if Zhang Yan had a way to break the blood spirits, as long as he maintained the attack, he would not be able to free himself. However, at this moment, it seemed that Zhang Yan had another secret treasure with him. He thought to himself, I still want to test a few more times, but it's too late now. Forget it, at this point, if I don't make a move, all my previous efforts will be in vain. Thinking of this, he did not hesitate anymore. He turned his palm and a long nail that was condensed from gray smoke was secretly held in his hand. This treasure was called the 7-Ju heart-piercing nail. He abandoned his own protective treasure light and used the spiritual opportunity. He then used a magical weapon as a support and refined it with the baleful demonic poison. This thing had a form but no substance. It was unusually sharp, and ordinary magic weapons would not be able to resist it. If a cultivator was hit by it, he would die instantly. It was not without reason that he was afraid of the water element true light. Although this treasure was powerful, it had a flaw. It needed to borrow the hands of the blood spirits to use it. Moreover, the speed of this nail was relatively slow. If the distance was too far, it would be very easy for the opponent to avoid it. Only when the distance was more than 200 feet would he have the confidence to stab the opponent. However, this was not enough. Gao Ruowang's eyes sharpened. In order to ensure that this attack would be foolproof, he decided to use himself as a bait to trick Zhang Yan to make a move. At that time, he would have the confidence to use this treasure. He waved his sleeves and leaped into a conveyance light, rushing towards Zhang Yan. When he was within 100 feet, he saw that there was a sword light coming up to block him. He immediately shook his body and transformed into 100 blood spirits. They drilled into the sword net and broke into the inner circle. He hid the heart-piercing nail in his sleeve and hid outside, waiting for an opportunity. Seeing that Gao Ruowang took the initiative to come up, Zhang Yan would not miss this opportunity no matter whether he was playing tricks or not. His eyes were suddenly filled with killing intent. He turned his Xian Qi and the high cloud above his head shook. 2 lights, one red and one gold, flew out at the same time. Seeing him attack, Gao Ruowang shouted loudly. He didn't dodge the 2 rays of true light that attacked him, and with a flick of his sleeve, he tossed it forward. A slender gray nail flew out of his hand, and it only flew a few meters before it suddenly disappeared. When it appeared again, it actually flew out from the body of a blood soul in front of him. With a poof, it pierced through the golden curtain of the heaven and earth leaf and directly pierced into Zhang Yan's chest. With another sound of silk ripping, it exploded into a mist of blood that filled the sky. At this moment, the blood banner in Gao Ruowang's bosom sensed danger and flashed, bringing him inside. The 2 lights flew over. First, the red light struck down and tore apart the layer of gray barrier of the human skin smiling face shield like it was paper. Then, with a flash of golden light, the blood banner was cut in half. When the 2 lights disappeared, the blood banner suddenly closed and shook. Gao Ruowang escaped from it again. He looked at the scene in front of him and couldn't help but show joy in his eyes. Although he had once again sacrificed the death substitution technique, it was worth it to be able to kill a great enemy like Zhang Yan. He had always been cautious. At this moment, although he thought that he had won against Zhang Yan, he still used his magic treasures to protect himself. However, when cultivators fought, even if they had treasures to protect themselves, if they were careless, they could fall into a life-threatening situation. Just as he was slightly distracted, a brilliant spiritual light suddenly flew over and arrived in front of him in an instant. This thing was like a spiritual carp and pecked at the human skin smiling face shield. It instantly pierced a hole, and the treasure let out a cry. Its spiritual light had already leaked out and it fell from the sky. Not good. Gao Ruowang's expression changed greatly. How could he not know that Zhang Yan had not been killed? At this moment, the situation was extremely disadvantageous to him. He hurriedly used the blood transformation escape technique to escape. However, he had only gone a few feet away when he saw more than 20 sword lights coming from all directions. They surrounded him and sealed off all his escape routes. Gao Ruowang's face twitched. He turned around and took the initiative to escape into the blood banner. The sword lights arrived in an instant and slashed inside, tearing the blood light into pieces. After more than 20 sword lights slashed, they each flew forward a few dozen feet. They were still in the same encirclement as before. Then, the sword lights turned around to attack again. Gao Ruowang's last technique to protect his life was destroyed and he had also lost his defensive profound weapon. He was at the end of his rope. With no other choice, he fiercely clenched his teeth and shook his body to shake off a ball of cloud from the top of his head, transforming it into a ray of spiritual light to protect his body. Then, he activated his escape technique and actually forcefully broke through the sword net's blockade. Zhang Yan sneered and flicked his finger. The Xianming heavy water flew out and smashed into Gao Ruowang's chest. He screamed and fell from the sky, landing on a flying peak. Zhang Yan looked down and waved his hand. As his sleeves fluttered, a large ball of muddy yellow qi immediately flew down with the wind. At this moment, Gao Ruowang's sternum was broken and he had no strength to dodge. Seeing that the Dao technique was strange, he could not see through it. He could only forcefully use his Fa Li. With a low roar, he shook off the cloud above his head and turned it into a red light mist to protect his body. However, to his surprise, this muddy yellow gas did not have the earth-shattering power he had imagined. When it came into contact with the blood mist, his expression could not help but become absent-minded. His whole body suddenly disappeared from where he stood. Zhang Yan knew that the Blood Soul sect had various secret techniques that were impossible to guard against. As long as there was a slight mistake, it was very likely that this person would escape. Seeing that Gao Ruowang had landed on the flying peak, he used the earth escape technique to escape into the peak. Although with this person's Fa Li, it would not take long for him to break out of the ground. However, with him here, how could it be so easy to let him out? With a clear shout, the earth element True Light was released from the cloud. It was 100 feet long and instantly swept the entire flying peak. This light had the effect of solidifying the soil like steel. With one sweep, the soil under this side of the peak immediately turned as hard as steel. When Gao Ruowang came back to his senses, he found that he was actually deep in the soil. Although this place could not hurt him, he was afraid that Zhang Yan had a backup plan. He quickly used the blood transformation escape technique. His body turned into a scarlet-red escape light and rushed out from the inside. Not long after, he broke through the soil and saw the sky. However, halfway out, the soil beside him suddenly condensed and became incomparably hard. Immediately, his body stiffened and he was unable to move. At this moment, the upper half of his body was already exposed, but the lower half of his body was stuck under the flying peak. This situation immediately caused his face to turn pale. He could be considered to have made a prompt decision. He knew that staying here would undoubtedly lead to death. He hurriedly used a secret technique, wanting to use his origin spirit to wrap all the blood essence in his body and escape. However, just as he used the technique, a sword light had already killed him horizontally. With a crack, it struck his head. The head was still in the air when suddenly its eyes rolled up. A blood light rushed out from the top of the head. Before it could go into the clouds, the sound of waves rose, and with a flash of water, it had already been drawn in. Zhang Yan flicked his big sleeve and slowly landed on the peak. He raised his eyes and calmly looked into the distant sky. Chapter 581. Lu Muqiu was originally sitting quietly, but all of a sudden, his body shuddered. Something in his heart was cut off, and his eyes revealed an expression of disbelief. He did not expect that with Gao Ruowang's skills, he would be killed by Zhang Yan in less than a minute. He had thought that Sun Yangzi or Yan Huixin would be defeated, but he did not expect that something would go wrong with Gao Ruowang. His head was drenched in cold sweat. This Zhang Yan was so powerful. If he rushed to help the other disciples of the Celestial Sect of Wonders, then the arrangements made by the 6 sects of the Spirit Sect might collapse. The situation could be said to be extremely dangerous. Thinking about this, he suddenly felt a little uneasy. Right now, there were only 2 choices. The first was to send someone to stop Zhang Yan and stall him again. The second was to give up on the duel and retreat. The first option was not very possible. Among the demon sect disciples who came for the duel, he was the only one who had not fought with anyone yet. But he still needed to be in the middle to coordinate and use his skills. Even if he did not consider this, Luo Qingyu and Zhong Muqing from Qinsang School were heading over. If there was no one to control the formation, how would he be able to restrain the 2 of them? Therefore, he could not leave at all. As for the second option, with his status among the 6 of them, he could not make such a decision. According to the discussion that the 6 of them had, it was not that they did not consider such a situation and had prepared a way to deal with it. It was just that he was not sure if he should use it. Lu Muqiu took in a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He called out to Feng Haiyang in his mind. After about 10 breaths, he got a definite response. His expression became extremely solemn. After a long time, he sighed and thought to himself, now, I can only try according to Senior Brother Feng's suggestion. Whether it succeeds or not, it all depends on the luck of the spiritual sect. Since he was forced to this stage, he wanted to turn the tables. He could only take the risk. He silently chanted and called out the name of Jiuling sect's Yan Huixin in his mind. At this moment, hundreds of miles away, Zhou Huang was stepping on starlight and traveling in the void. His gaze shifted downwards and he looked at a cliff. He shouted coldly, "Coward, get out here." Just as he was speaking, several pillars of starlight suddenly burst out from the astral clouds above, piercing straight down. The power of this light was wild and ferocious. With a single strike, the flying peak was blasted into smithereens. Amidst the hazy smoke and dust, a ray of green light swiftly rose. "Rush to somewhere else." Zhou Huang raised his head slightly, looked up, and said with contempt, "Why struggle?" He took a step forward, and in an instant, he appeared 100 feet behind this person. Then, with a wave of his hand, he released a lightning bead of divine might. The resplendent light contained the sound of thunder, and after a loud explosion, the person in front of him immediately let out a scream. However, he was hit by the lightning bead. Not only did this person not die, but he even sped up a little. After he was far away, he stopped just now, coughed, and turned around. Zhou Huang took a closer look. Seeing that this person was dressed in green, and although his face was handsome, there were 2 short horns on his forehead, a look of disgust appeared in his eyes. He said, "As expected of a demon, you actually used the body of a beast to store your soul." Although the green-clothed cultivator's body was a mess of flesh and blood. But at this moment, the wound was actually slowly healing. He raised his hand to wipe the blood at the corner of his mouth, and laughed loudly, "Sage Zhou, why do you have to mock me? You need to know that everything in the world has a spirit." Zhou Huang shouted sternly, "Shut up, you dare to reason with me." As he spoke, the astral clouds above his head suddenly trembled, and in a split second, the brilliant brilliance was like the scorching sun illuminating the world, enveloping the horizon. He pointed down again, and a sharp ray of light separated from the light. The starlight was resplendent, and it seemed to shoot down from the 9 heavens. The green-clothed cultivator was shocked, and hurriedly leaped to dodge, but there was no time. After being shown by the light, his body, which even the lightning bead could not destroy, actually burst into flames out of thin air, burning fiercely. He roared, tore off his arm, and threw it down the cloud. In just a breath's time, his entire body turned into ashes and flew away. An arrow's distance away, the arm spat out a wisp of white smoke, and it turned around sneakily, as if it was trying to escape. Right at this moment, a star thunder bead chased over, and with a thunderous sound, it blew it into pieces, leaving only a wisp of smoke in the air. After Zhou Huang killed this person, he flew up into the air, and his imposing gaze swept across the flying peaks and strange rocks around him. This was already the 4th demon spirit cultivator that he had found and killed, and the main character was still nowhere to be seen. He knew that Jiuling sect's soul separation technique was the number 1 out of the 6 sections. Even if a portion of the soul was cut off, it would not be able to harm the core. In fact, after devouring the soul of others, they could even refine it back. Therefore, he used the vast clouds of one breath to lock down the entire world. With that, no matter how many demon spirits there were, he could just kill them all. He had thought that he could end the battle quickly, but he had not expected that Yan Huixin had just learned a secret skill of Jiuling sect that no one else knew about. It allowed him to control spirit weapons from 100 miles away to fight with his enemies, while his true body could hide elsewhere, making it impossible for others to hurt him. At this moment, Zhou Huang also felt that something was wrong, and he thought to himself, "It's probably impossible to kill this person in a short period of time. I've already wasted quite a bit of time here. If I continue to be entangled here, even if I can really find this person and kill him, who knows how much time I'll have wasted." Thinking up to this point, he decided not to bother with this person anymore. With a light wave of his sleeves, he dispelled the skill and flew away on his own. However, it was unknown whether it was due to the might of his skill or some other reason, but Yan Huixin actually did not show himself anymore. After Zhou Huang had gone several miles away, he turned his gaze around and saw a letter floating in the sky. His expression changed, and he raised his hand to summon it. He realized that it was from Xia Keming, and by the looks of it, it seemed like he had been there for quite some time. He thought to himself, this should be junior brother noticing Zhang Yan's location, and he's calling me over to meet up with him. After pondering for a moment, he withdrew the sun-cleansing mirror and shook it towards the outside as he wanted to investigate the current situation. However, as soon as he did so, his expression changed abruptly, and he shouted furiously before his figure flashed away. Elder Chen expended some effort before finally catching Xia Keming's soul-guarding cauldron, but he was just about to make a move when he suddenly felt a mirror light sweep past his body. He was stunned as he noticed that this light seemed familiar, and his movements couldn't help but stop as slight hesitation appeared on his face. Xia Keming, who hid within the soul-guarding cauldron, was originally filled with despair, and he felt that he had no chance of survival. At this moment, however, he was overjoyed instead, and he shouted out from within the cauldron. Daoren Shen, if you dare make a move, my senior brother will surely not let you off. Why aren't you letting me go? At this moment, Elder Chen's mind had already gradually calmed down, and he sighed to himself. He'd originally thought of every possible way to avoid incurring enmity with Yuxiao School, yet he'd never imagined that Zhou Huang would still find out. Since it was like this, could he still hope that Yuxiao School would let him off? He grabbed towards the cauldron with an expressionless face, paying no attention to Xia Keming's hoarse roars as he circulated his magic power, and a strong wind stirred, snuffing out Xia Keming's origin spirit along with the rest of his words. At this moment, a brilliant ray of starlight flew over from the horizon, and arrived above his head. With a flash of brilliance, Zhou Huang appeared from within, and with a single step, he was already in front of Elder Chen. With a frosty expression, he looked at Elder Chen, and said in a deep voice, Shen Yinfeng, who gave you the courage to dare kill my Yuxiao School's disciple? Elder Chen replied unhurriedly, Spiritual Master Zhou, you've wronged I. Your fellow disciple acted recklessly, and actually wanted to kill my fellow Taoists in order to seize the decree. I, Daoren, was also forced into a corner, and had no choice but to retaliate. However, I couldn't stop myself for a moment, and caused your junior brother's soul to scatter. It really wasn't what I wanted, and I hope that spiritual master can forgive me. No matter what, he had to first gain the upper hand in his words, or else the revenge of Yuxiao School would not be something that Guangyuan sect could endure. Zhou Huang's eyes sharpened. For an elder of a small sect like Elder Chen, he didn't even put him in his eyes, and was too lazy to argue with him verbally. He only said 2 words coldly, die. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his sleeve, and a brilliant ray of starlight flew out. In an instant, it dyed the firmament, and shone through the horizon. The horizontal light was like a chain, extending for thousands of feet, and continued to shine down. He originally planned to use his supernatural powers to quickly kill this person, but who would have thought that Elder Chen didn't panic? With a calm expression, he took out a talisman that he had already prepared in his hand, and a clear chi suddenly appeared on his body, and revolved around him. When the dazzling light brushed past his body, it actually couldn't penetrate at all. This golden axis talisman was originally in the possession of the Guangyuan sect's head. Not only did the founder of the sect imbue it with great mana, but it was also personally refined by the ascended spiritual master Shinchong. Now that it was being used by Elder Chen, a cultivator of Yuanying second tier, it was definitely not something that Zhou Huang could break. Elder Chen calmly cupped his hands and said, Spiritual Master Zhou, farewell. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and flew away on the conveyance light. Zhou Huang's expression was gloomy. He looked at Elder Chen's disappearing silhouette, but he didn't chase after him. He only sneered and formed a hand seal with his hand. Suddenly, a green light shone down from the clouds, and enveloped everything within a 10-mile radius. After a while, the light dispersed, and the 2 of them were already gone. Zhang Yan's mana had been greatly depleted after the battle with Gao Ruowang, so he went to a flying peak to meditate and adjust his breathing, while waiting for Elder Chen to return. The spiritual energy in the star stone was only slightly less than that in the floating heavenly palace. It was extremely dense, and in less than a cup of tea's time, his mana was fully recovered. He pondered for a while. Just now, during the battle, he had lost a death substitution Dharma body, and he was afraid that he would have to face many opponents later. He should use the incantation from the Unfettered chapter to refine another one. When he was condensing his mana and true seal, he had also imbued his essence with this incantation. Although he didn't deliberately cultivate this incantation, it was still considered profound. After a while, he managed to refine another fake body. After he woke up from his meditation, he looked at the sky, and his eyebrows couldn't help but twitch. Up until now, he still hadn't seen Elder Chen return, so something must have happened. While he was pondering, he suddenly saw a ray of light climbing up in the distance, so he took out the moon cleansing mirror that he seized from Xia Keming from his sleeve and looked at it, and saw the entire scene that appeared in his eyes. He pondered for a moment, then shook his sleeve and flew up, leaping in the air and transforming into a ray of sword light. He flew towards that direction. Chapter 582. In a corner of the star's stone, there was the occasional sound of thunder and waves. Within a radius of 5.5 miles, thousands of demons danced and howled in the air. From time to time, there would be sword rays and green energy shuttling through the air. It was almost impossible to see the shadows of the cultivators fighting. Feng Haiyang and several Xian men disciples had already been fighting for close to an hour. With the help of the shifting technique and the Yellow Springs escape technique, he alone was able to suppress all the Xian men disciples. Even so, the battle was already in a stalemate. It seemed that it would not be easy for either side to win in a short period of time. Although Nie Gui of the South Flower sect was saved by his brother and was able to escape, he was still heavily injured by Feng Haiyang and had almost lost his ability to fight. If he had the talisman in hand, he might be able to escape from the Star Stone. However, this item had already been taken by Feng Haiyang, so he could only stay here. As fellow Xian men, the young couple and Tong Yingyuan's senior and junior brothers could not ignore him and could only do their best to protect him. Feng Haiyang's actions were obviously intentional, so they had no choice but to send one person to take care of him. At this moment, there was a sudden loud sound. 3 circles of purple light exploded in the green energy. The aftermath spread out like ripples, and all the demons that got close were scattered without exception. Yang Bai looked at the sunlight shining down without any obstruction and praised, Tong Jinren has good methods. Wife, attack with me and break him again. Let's see how much transcendence energy he can use. Zhu Xian replied in a clear voice. The two of them spun their swords, causing a pair of sword lights to charge out like a waterfall. They were like 2 waterfalls that tore through the sky, and they killed hundreds of devils in succession before their momentum decreased slightly. However, only when the sky became clear did the surging tribulation waters below surge, and then another 1,000 devils fiercely charged out from within, and it seemed as if they were unable to kill all of them. Seeing this, the young couple felt slightly powerless. They could only turn around and slash again with their sword rays. Tong Yingyuan took this opportunity and hurriedly waved his hand. He retrieved the 3 purple sun seeds that were still in the sky. After grabbing them in his palm, he calmed his mind. Ever since he entered the battle circle, he was in the limelight for a moment. Once the 3 treasured seeds were shot out, once he used the 3 treasured seeds, he would definitely disperse a large portion of the demons that filled the air. However, this item was not a magic treasure. Not only could he not defend himself against the enemy, but he also needed to consume a large amount of Fa Li to use it. Therefore, every time he attacked, he was extremely careful. Feng Haiyang seemed to have noticed his weakness. During the battle, more than 70% of the attacks landed on him, as if they wanted to eliminate him first. Tong Yingyuan was also in a fluster. If it wasn't for the young couple by his side, it would have been difficult for him to make a move. He looked up. Seeing that Feng Haiyang was being held back, he said to a fat cultivator behind him, "Junior brother Duan, protect me. I'll rest for a while." The other disciple from Taihao School was called Duan Liao. This person rode a spacious cloud raft and was precisely the person responsible for looking after Niegui. At this moment, seeing Tong Yingyuan speak to him, Duan Liao was immediately all smiles, cupping his hands and saying, "Little brother obeys." He gave his hand a little. A huge banana leaf flew out from the astral clouds above. It was as wide as a fan, and its shade blotted out the sun. It was incomparably wide, and even compared to the green jade gourd beneath Tong Yingyuan's feet that was as large as a mountain. It looked like it could cover more than 1,000 people. Tong Yingyuan didn't dare to sit down. He only stood and circulated his technique a few times. After 7 or 8 breaths. Then, he stopped. For some reason, Feng Haiyang's attacks were even more ferocious. Without his support, the young couple wouldn't be able to defend either. After carefully observing for a while, Tong Yingyuan held the 3 purple sun seeds in his palm. He didn't use them, but used the Jade Brilliance Thunderwood sword. With a shout, he raised his hand and pointed. It turned into thousands of eerie wooden swords that shot towards the blue sky, piercing through the demons in their path. Seeing the great momentum, Feng Haiyang didn't dare to be careless. He calmly summoned torrential water to block it. The young couple immediately withdrew their swords and turned into a beam of light, rushing under the banana leaf. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. At this point in the battle, they also felt that it was quite strenuous. They didn't seem to have it any easier than Tong Yingyuan. Yang Bai shook his head and said, "What is Feng Haiyang doing? Is he going to fight to the death with us?" Just now in the sky, although it was only for a moment, Feng Haiyang had used all kinds of techniques. Even he almost couldn't handle it. Zhu Xian also had lingering fears. She said, "That demon is really strange. If it wasn't for my husband, I'm afraid I would have been injured by him." Thinking about the few people who were killed, her face turned slightly pale. Tong Yingyuan looked at the two of them and said fiercely, "Sage Yang, Madam Yang, don't be disheartened. We don't have to fight to the death with him. Let's see how long he can fight with us. Our fellow Taoists from the Celestial sect should be inside this star stone. There are only 6 of them, let's see who can outlast the other." Yang Bai also didn't want to fight to the death with Feng Haiyang. When he heard what Tong Yingyuan said, he immediately agreed and said, "Brother Tong's words make sense." At this moment, Duan Liao suddenly complained and said, "Senior brother, fellow Taoists, my treasure can't hold on for much longer." The 3 of them turned around to take a look, and their expressions changed slightly. The banana leaf was originally covered in a myriad of strands of green light, and the brilliance shot out to a distance of 15 feet. However, as they spoke, under the incessant attacks of the demons, it was gradually worn down, and there was only less than 10 feet left. Tong Yingyuan glanced at Duan Liao and saw that he had an extremely pained expression. He blushed and said, "Junior brother, don't worry. I won't take advantage of you. I'll compensate you when we get back." After saying that, he controlled the green jade gourd under his feet and flew straight up into the sky. Duan Liao muttered to himself and said, "You sure know how to take advantage of me. Wouldn't it be much easier if you gave me a purple sun seed to use?" When he spoke, his voice was low and unclear. The young couple didn't know what he was saying. After thanking him, they flew up on their sword light and passed under the banana leaf. They also rushed into the sky. When the 3 of them reached the top of the sky, they saw Feng Haiyang standing high up with his hands behind his back. He looked at them with a deep gaze and said calmly, "Everyone, it's time to determine the winner and loser." After saying that, he smiled and suddenly turned into a wisp of yellow smoke and flew into the clouds. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace. Tong Yingyuan sneered. He had seen Feng Haiyang perform this kind of Dao technique many times before, so he wasn't surprised. He was about to use the Jade Brilliance Thunderwood sword to break this technique when a demon suddenly appeared from the side and tried to bite his arm. Even with the protective treasure light covering his body, Tong Yingyuan didn't dare to let it bite him. He immediately dodged it. When the smoke in the sky dispersed, Feng Haiyang appeared in the void again. He looked at the three of them below him and raised his fist before his chest. With a loud shout, he spat out a 3-foot-long white light from his mouth. The young couple only took a glance and instantly felt dizzy. Their bodies swayed and they only came back to their senses after a moment of daze. The two of them were shocked. They subconsciously used the conveyance light and dodged far away. It was fine if they were far away, but Tong Yingyuan, who was close to them, saw it. His limbs were numb. He couldn't move. This was the Netherworld Spring Sect's divine art, the soul-dispersing 3-dispelling chi. Cultivators who saw it would be confused. If their cultivation level was low, they would definitely faint on the spot. When a cultivator was full of spirit and chi, this chi wouldn't be that powerful. However, if they used up a lot of their spiritual energy, they would be hit immediately. It wasn't hard to break this technique. They just needed to close their eyes when the person using the technique opened his mouth and shouted, and they would be able to dodge it. However, in the past thousands of years, no disciple of the Taoist sect had seen this divine art. The three of them were immediately at a disadvantage. Feng Haiyang came down from the clouds and instantly appeared in front of Tong Yingyuan. He glanced at him and waved his big sleeves. In an instant, a large ball of black smoke flew out. This ball of air moved slowly. It first encountered the green jade gourd. This treasure couldn't withstand it either. The glowing talisman cracked one after another. After the wind and smoke blew past, its spirituality was completely gone. Its color turned grayish-white. It turned into powder and fell down bit by bit. Tong Yingyuan's face suddenly turned pale. His whole body was cold. He struggled with all his might, wanting to avoid it, but how could his limbs not stop moving? He could only watch as the ball of air flew over and spread to his body. In just a moment, his body and origin spirit had all disappeared along with the wind, and his entire person no longer existed. Only a dazzling golden edict was still floating down. When Feng Haiyang used this technique, he also revealed a flaw. Suddenly, 2 rays of sword light flashed by and sliced him into 3 pieces. Duan Liao, who was below, opened his mouth wide. He looked at this scene in shock. After a moment, he came back to his senses. He quickly flew over and grabbed the talisman in his hand. At the same time, he waved his hand and took the 3 purple jade sun seeds as well. However, if he wanted to use this item, he would have to sacrifice it and erase the restriction that Tong Yingyuan put in it. He couldn't do it in a hurry. At this moment, he suddenly heard the sound of water. The tribulation water in the surroundings rose up and surged toward him. It seemed like it wanted to drown him. His expression changed and he thought, not good. He quickly took out the banana leaf and wrapped it tightly around himself like a blanket. He blocked the demon that was rushing toward him. Yang Bai spun around in the sky and said to Zhu Xian, who was beside him, "Wife, let's go." Zhu Xian was stunned and asked in confusion, "What do you mean, husband?" Yang Bai said softly, "Feng Haiyang has used many divine arts consecutively. His magic power is not small. My wife and I can take this chance to escape. It won't be too late to fight him after we find our fellow Taoists." Zhu Xian seemed to find it hard to accept. She covered her mouth and said, "How can husband do this? Are fellow Taoist Duan and fellow Taoist Nye going to abandon us like this?" Yang Bai laughed mockingly and said, "Can't you tell what fellow Taoist Duan is planning? If he leaves later, are you going to leave us here to block Feng Haiyang alone? If it comes to that, you and I might end up like him." With his reminder, Zhu Xian immediately understood. She glanced at the banana leaf and nodded silently. Then, she rode a sword light and followed Yang Bai into the clouds, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Duan Liao hid in the banana leaf. Seeing that the talisman wouldn't be able to resist for long, he picked up the talisman and muttered something. After about 10 breaths, he felt all the magic power in his body rushing into the talisman. He instantly went limp on the cloud raft. At this moment, there wasn't a single drop of magic power left in his body. he didn't have any power to resist. Looking at the dancing talisman, he roared in his heart, quick, 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 ah. After a while, the banana leaf was the first to be unable to resist. A thin crack appeared on it and tribulation water seeped in. Duan Liao was scared out of his wits. Just when he thought that he had no chance of survival, a golden light suddenly climbed up from the talisman and enveloped him and Nie Gui. With a shake, it easily broke through the demon encirclement and transformed into a streak of light that flew away. This streak of light was incomparably fast. In the blink of an eye, it had already escaped from this star stone. It then passed through the astral wind and descended like a meteor towards Chengyuan Valley below the extreme sky. Chapter 583. Duan Liao descended on the golden light, passing through the high clouds and landing on the peak of Taihao School. After a moment of absent-mindedness, he came back to his senses and looked at his body. As the golden light dissipated, the edict had completely disappeared. With this one missing, there were only 17 decrees left in the sky. After the slight regret in his heart, he relaxed. Even if he didn't obtain the Junyang essence during this trip to the Star Stone, he didn't lose the Jasper Violet Sun Seed. This could be considered a great merit, so the sect wouldn't be too harsh on him. Tong Yingyuan, a fellow sect member, died, but he didn't feel any sorrow. The two of them had entered the Tao 100 years apart and didn't have much of a relationship. Moreover, he was fat, while Tong Yingyuan had the appearance of a handsome young man. Duan Liao had never been in his eyes. Now that Tong Yingyuan was dead, he felt a bit happy. Other than Nie Gui, who was seriously injured and unconscious, he was the first disciple to leave the Star Stone of his own accord. Thus, the elders of the various sects came to inquire about the current situation in the heavens. After recounting what had happened, he was dragged to a secluded place by an elder of Taihao School. The elder asked coldly, "Martial nephew Duan, did you take back the 2 purple jade sun seeds?" Duan Liao hurriedly took out the 2 purple jade sun seeds and respectfully handed them over. Martial nephew risked his life to take them back. Before he finished speaking, the 2 seeds were snatched away by the elder and put into his sleeve. His expression softened and he said to him, "Although you didn't obtain Jun Yang's essence, you didn't lose the sect's treasures. You can say that your merits offset your demerits. When we return, I will speak up for you." After saying this, the elder didn't seem to want to talk more with him and turned to leave. Duan Liao's expression relaxed. He reached into his sleeve and grabbed the seed that he had hidden, feeling extremely excited. Tong Yingyuan's position in the sect was very high. After exchanging the Jade Jasper Violet Sun Seed for the Talisman Decree, Tong Yingyuan's position was very high. After exchanging the Purple Jade Sun Seed for the Decree, he didn't tell the elders of the sect about it. Duan Liao made up his mind. Now that he had it, he didn't want to hand it over. However, there was another worry. The young couple might not tell the truth. Duan Liao secretly made up his mind. If this couple made it out alive, he would have to make friends with them, even if he had to pay a price. He had to find a way to shut their mouths. Inside the Star Stone, a clear sword light spun around and finally stopped on a flying mountain peak. Zhang Yan stood on the rock. As the rock under his feet slowly fluttered, the scenery in front of him also slowly changed. However, after looking around, he found that the atmosphere was not right. The spiritual vigor of heaven and earth seemed to have been blocked by someone, like a drop of ink on a piece of white paper. It was an eyesore and gave off a feeling of incompatibility. This scene seemed familiar to him, and he pondered for a moment. He thought to himself, this should be the vast cloud of one breath of heaven technique. Only Zhou Huang knows how to use it. Fellow Taoist Shen has been gone for a long time, so he must be unlucky to have met this person. He pondered for a moment. This supernatural power and spell of Jade Heaven sect was very profound. It would be difficult for those who did not know the method to break it. If he had mastered the 5 elements escape technique, he could give it a try. But now, he was powerless. Whether Elder Shen could keep his life or not, it would depend on his own luck. Zhang Yan changed his mind again. Since he couldn't think of anything here, he might as well leave to find the Junyang pot first. After making up his mind, he was about to move, but the moment he summoned the sword pellet, he stopped. He raised his head and looked at the sky without blinking. After 10 breaths, the spiritual vigor in the sky suddenly became chaotic. The clouds collapsed, and a dazzling golden light pierced through the sky. This light was thin at first, then it turned into several strands, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into hundreds of rays. It was like a bright sun, bursting out in the void. After a short while, Elder Shen flew out on a ray of conveyance light. Looking at his appearance, he seemed to be in a sorry state. Zhang Yan shifted his gaze and looked behind Elder Shen. He saw several dazzling thunder pearls flying towards him. He smiled and didn't go forward. He stood on the spot and made a gesture. Several purple thunderbolts flew out from the high cloud above his head, and after a few explosions, the thunder pearls were dispersed. Elder Shen turned and saw Zhang Yan's figure. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. He turned the conveyance light and headed towards him. When he was near, he descended and said, "Thank you, Jinren Zhang, for saving me." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Shen, you don't have to be so polite. You are very capable. Even this vast cloud of one breath of heaven couldn't trap you, but I can't be compared to you." Elder Shen, however, sighed and said, "Jinren Zhang, you must be joking. Jinren Zhou's divine arts are truly brilliant, far better than mine. If it wasn't for the golden axis talisman passed down by the patriarch, how could Daoren have escaped?" As the two spoke, there was a sudden loud noise in the clouds. A ray of starlight flew through the air and arrived above the two of them. Just now, it stopped. The ray of light was like a silvery river that flew across the sky, brilliant and dazzling. At this moment, the starlight parted and Zhou Huang walked out from within. Looking down, his eyes were as cold as a blade. After a moment of silence, he said in a low voice, "Zhang Yan, Shen Yinfeng injured my junior brother. Why are you stopping me? Do you want to go against me, Yu Xiao?" Elder Shen was expressionless. During the sword contest, Zhang Yan killed Zhou Qingyun in front of everyone. It didn't violate the rules, so Yu Xiao School couldn't do anything to him. However, killing Xia Keming was a different matter. No one could explain the reason behind it. Yu Xiao School could use this as an excuse to cause trouble in the future. Even if Zhang Yan was a disciple of Qinsang School, he probably wouldn't want to cause such trouble. Thus, he guessed that although Zhang Yan would protect him, he wouldn't tell the real reason behind this matter. Zhang Yan smiled and clasped his hands behind his back. He said with emotion, "Xia Keming was killed by me, Zhang Yan. It has nothing to do with Elder Shen. Jinren Zhou, what are you going to do?" As soon as he said this, Elder Shen couldn't help but turn his head to look. He never thought that Zhang Yan would dare to admit it in front of him without the slightest intention of evading. Zhou Huang's expression changed several times as he stared fixedly at Zhang Yan. At that time, he had the help of his fellow disciples. But now, Xia Keming was already dead, and there were disciples of the devil doctrine watching from the side. Moreover, there were two people on Zhang Yan's side. Even if he was confident that he could kill the two of them, he would have to pay a great price. At that time, it was very likely that the people of the devil doctrine would take advantage of him. After calmly weighing the pros and cons, he didn't say a word. He turned around and fled in the starlight. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the air. Seeing him leave, Elder Shen couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He sighed and said, "Jinren Zhang, if this person insists on making things difficult for us, I think it will be a fierce battle." Zhang Yan said lightly, "That's exactly what I want." Elder Shen was startled. Then, he laughed and cupped his hands. "If that's the case, Daoren isn't stingy to risk his life and fight." Hearing his hoarse laughter, Zhang Yan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He turned his head and carefully looked at Elder Shen. Although he looked spirited on the surface, he could see some exhaustion in the depths of his eyes. His face was even more gloomy. He asked, is fellow Shen injured? Elder Shen shook his head and said, that's not the case. That golden earth axis talisman is the token of our sect leader. There are several layers of prohibition. The first layer of prohibition is still fine, but the other few layers need to be combined with a mysterious method. Just now, in order to break that entrapment divine ability, Daoren forcefully opened the prohibition. He has injured a lot of vitality and needs to recuperate. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, this place is full of spiritual energy. Fellow Shen, you might as well find a place to cultivate in seclusion. As long as you don't wander around, I think no one will find you. If you really run into danger, you might as well use the talisman to go. Elder Shen nodded silently. This was the best. He needed at least 2 hours to recuperate. Zhang Yan still needed to search for Jun Yang's spiritual essence, so he couldn't stay here to look after Elder Shen. He could only wait for his transcendence energy to recover before rushing over. Only a few miles away from the two, Yan Huixin was hiding behind a high hill. Seeing Zhou Huang fly away on the conveyance light, he thought it was a pity. Previously, Lu Muqiu had asked him to step down, hoping to make use of the enmity between Zhang Yan and Zhou Huang. If the two of them were to fight, it would be for the best if one of them died, or if both of them were severely injured. Seeing that the two of them didn't fight, he was greatly disappointed. Now, he was faced with a difficult problem. Should he continue to stall Zhou Huang or stop Zhang Yan? Neither of them were easy to deal with. Not to mention Zhou Huang, he could only rely on his devil spirit to fight with him during the fight just now. Zhang Yan was even harder to deal with. Even Gao Ruowang was killed by him. Just thinking about this kind of enemy made him tremble in fear. After thinking about it, he still couldn't make up his mind. He called up Lu Muqiu's name in his mind to ask for a solution. After a while, Lu Muqiu responded in his mind with an urgent voice, Senior Brother Yan, you must stop Zhang Yan. We can ignore Zhou Huang for now. Yan Huixin frowned and asked reluctantly, why? Lu Muqiu said patiently, Yuxiao School is far to the south of Donghua. It rarely interacts with other sects and doesn't have a deep relationship with them. Even if we let Zhou Huang leave for now, he won't go with the other disciples of Xianmen immediately. It's highly likely that he'll go look for Jun Yang's spiritual essence first. But Zhang Yan is different. He's from Qinsang School and is on the same side as Hu Xian, Luo Qingyu, and Zhong Muqing. They might cooperate with each other. If that's the case, we have no chance of winning this sword fight. Yan Huixin was shocked. Lu Muqiu's words made sense. It was fine if the 4 disciples of Qinsang School were divided into 4 groups. Once they joined forces, the remaining 5 of them might not be able to deal with them. However, he was still hesitant to go against Zhang Yan, so he didn't speak for a long time. Seeing that he was unwilling to agree, Lu Muqiu became anxious. If he missed out on Zhang Yan, he might come to him. This was a matter of life and death, so he couldn't delay it. He could only say, Senior Brother Yan, at this critical juncture, the disciples of Spiritual Gate should work together to overcome this difficulty. Yan Huixin changed his mind and said, it's not that I don't want to, but Zhang Yan's sword escape is fast. How can I catch up with him? Lu Muqiu immediately said, it's not difficult. I can help you with the 10,000 miles ruler technique. You should be able to catch up. As soon as he finished speaking, Yan Huixin felt a surge of mana on his body. After hesitating for a while, he let it move his body. He only felt that the scenery in front of him changed and he was already in a different place. However, when he looked around, his face suddenly became extremely ugly. At this moment, less than a mile away from the south, there was a rainbow-like sword light flying straight towards him. Chapter 584. P.S. This chapter was written yesterday and will be updated at night. Yan Huixin also guessed that Lu Muqiu might play some tricks, but he didn't expect that the latter would actually send him to Zhang Yan. It was obvious that Lu Muqiu wanted to force him to fight to the death. Before he could curse out loud, Lu Muchio's voice resounded in his mind again, "Senior Marshal Brother Yan, hold on for a while. When my mana recovers slightly, you can find another opportunity to escape. Then, I can transfer you out." Yan Huixin swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. No matter whether Lu Muchio's words were true or false, he had no choice at this moment. He said hatefully in his heart, "Lu Muchio, if I can get out of here alive, I will not let you go." He activated the incantation, and with a loud sound, a black flag that was about 60 feet tall rose up behind him. On the flag, there were the sun, moon, stars, birds, beasts, insects, and fish. The beast on the flag opened its mouth and spat out a green light. Immediately, a strong man with a face full of dragon beard appeared. He was like an iron tower, and he was wearing a thin armor made of fish scales. He held a long blade with a ghost head, and he looked extremely mighty. After he came out, he shook his body, and with a roar, he immediately summoned a strong wind and blocked the path of the sword light. Although Zhang Yan was flying on the sword, he still paid attention to the movements around him. He originally planned to go to the Star Stone Road, but when he saw Yan Huixin suddenly appearing in front of him, as if to stop him, he immediately stopped the sword light. He took a look and said, "So it's Shinren Yan here." After he killed Gao Ruowang, he obtained another talisman decree. Including the one he temporarily left with Elder Shen, he now had 4 talismans in his possession. If he had the chance, he wouldn't mind obtaining another one. Glancing at the muscular man, he could tell that he was a demonic cultivator. He smiled slightly, and a ray of water rose under his feet. It turned into a huge wave and rushed out, immediately blocking the man. The sword light suddenly swept over. The strong man hurriedly raised the divine weapon in his hand and was about to block it when Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and pointed. A thin ray of golden light flew out from the strong cloud and circled around the field. The strong man stood for a moment in a daze, then his body tilted. His head fell from his neck, and with a surge of the wave below, it disappeared without a trace. Yan Huixin released the man. However, he was killed by Zhang Yan in the blink of an eye, which gave him a huge fright. He immediately knew that Zhang Yan was even more difficult to deal with than Zhou Huang. He hated Lu Muchio even more. If it wasn't for his real body being here, he would have been able to transform into a spirit and possess his body, which would have been enough to unleash 60 to 70% of the demon spirit's abilities when he was alive. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been broken so easily. However, there was no time to think too much about the battle formation. After thinking for a moment, he extinguished the thought and began to form hand seals again. There were 16 stars behind the banner. Each star contained a devil spirit. Although he was a Yuaniing cultivator, there were not many Yuaniing cultivators in the world for him to subdue. Other than the 6 of them, the rest were only core formation cultivators. He was not bad. For example, the elders of the Jiuling sect, because they had been suppressed by the Xianmen for thousands of years, did not dare to be too presumptuous in the Donghua continent. They could only go to other continents to refine devil spirits. It was only now that the devil tribulation was gradually rising that they dared to act. Even so, they could only refine 2 or 3 people at most. In the battle between Yan Huixin and Zhou Huang, 4 of the 6 devil spirits had been killed, and his strength was greatly reduced. That was why he was unwilling to fight with Zhang Yan. Now that another one had been killed, there was only a few left, but it was the last thing he could rely on to survive. It was just that this devil spirit was a little special. Ever since he had obtained it, he had never asked for it. However, the situation now was critical, and he did not have much time to think. He gritted his teeth and with a shake of his hand, he threw out a fishing net. There were 4 blood bells hanging at the 4 corners, shaking rapidly. The moment the net flew into the air, it immediately stirred up a gust of wind and rain. Within each hole of the net, there seemed to be a person struggling, crying, and crying. Together with the sound of the bells, it created a horrifying sound. This was the Thousand Spirits life-seeking star knot. Its original body was a supreme treasure of the Jiuling sect. Because it was broken by someone, a powerful cultivator in the sect caught a demon spider that could not transform for 1,000 years and merged its fine silk into it. Finally, it was refined. It was extremely tough, and even divine weapons and flying swords could not cut it. There were also thousands of demons on it that could create illusions. If a cultivator was bound by it and lost control of their mind, their soul would be taken away, and they would become a walking corpse. If the owner took a liking to it, they would be kept in the banner and refined into a devil spirit. After this magical treasure was spread out, it actually stretched out for 7 to 8 miles. From the looks of it, it could still stretch out endlessly. Zhang Yan consecutively sent out several bolts of purple heaven thunder. However, only a few of the demons were blown away, and the net was not damaged at all. Even when the sword light flew over, it could not cut it. He then took out the 5 spirits 100 carp shuttle and pecked at it. However, he realized that it was also useless, and he could not help but feel surprised. Luckily, this treasure flew slowly. As long as the cultivator's movement technique was not too bad, he would be able to avoid it if he dodged carefully. It was not a threat to him at all. After thinking for a while, he felt that there was no need to fight it head-on. He spread out his flying sword and rushed up into the clouds, preparing to go around it from a high place. Yan Huixin also knew that this treasure wouldn't be able to trap Zhang Yan, so he was only using it to stall for time. He muttered an incantation, and after a while, he turned around and pointed at the moon pattern on the flag. A bright light immediately shone 7 feet in front of him, and a young cultivator leisurely walked out from it. This person had a good appearance. His skin was as warm as jade, and his eyes were clear. He was dressed in Taoist attire, and did not wear a crown on his head. After he came out, he did not have a consciousness like the demon spirits from before. He looked at Yan Huixin and said, "I remember that your fellow Taoist Song's disciple." Yan Huixin quickly cupped his hands and said, "Yes. I suddenly encountered a strong enemy today, and I hope that Senior can help me. After this, I will let your wife's primordial spirit go out and reincarnate. If I go against this oath, I will be abandoned by the heavens and men." The young cultivator smiled and said, "Back then, I volunteered to be on your master's flag, and I knew that this day would definitely come. I've finally waited for it." He looked back and saw a sword light flying in the sky. His expression turned slightly serious, and he said, "Who is this person? Is he a Shaoqing disciple?" Yan Huixin hurriedly said, "This person is from the Qinsang school, and he's one of the top 10 disciples." The young cultivator seemed to have thought of something, and his interest was instantly piqued. He muttered to himself, "Back then, I fought with Chen Zi, one of the top 10 disciples of the Qinsang school. I wonder how capable this person is. I'll go and meet him later." After he finished speaking, a golden light flashed above his head, and a sword plate flew out. He took a step forward and turned into a clear light, and went straight for Zhang Yan's escape light. At the same time, at the southwest corner of the Star Stone, Feng Haiyang's gaze was deep, and he flew towards the middle road while riding on the rolling yellow smoke. After knowing that Gao Ruowang was killed, he was already clear that the Devil Sect's previous arrangements were already useless. No matter how they tried to salvage the situation, it would still be full of loopholes. Thus, he allowed the young couple to escape, and did not put in any effort to chase after them. Now, the Devil Sect seemed to have lost on the surface, but he still had a plan to salvage the situation. However, he did not have any confidence in this plan, so he did not tell anyone about it. After traveling for a while, he suddenly stopped his escape light, and looked towards a flying peak with a burning gaze. He saw a demon chasing something in the rock stream. At first glance, it looked like a pot, but upon closer inspection, it looked like a section of tree root. The roots were intertwined, and it looked extremely simple. This thing was running in front, and the demon could not catch it no matter how hard it tried. Instead, it giggled like a child, as if it was playing with it. Feng Haiyang's eyes shone with a strange light, and he took out the talisman from his sleeve. He activated his magic power, and it immediately emitted a bright light. The pot was originally running happily, but when it felt the spiritual chi on the talisman, it seemed to be very unhappy. It humped a few times, twisted a few times, and stopped running. The demon came up to it and held it in its mouth. Feng Haiyang summoned the demon, and then he extended his hand to grab the spiritual pot. He held it in front of his eyes, and saw that the pot was greenish-yellow in color, and it was hard and smooth. It looked like it was made of wood, but it was not, like it was made of jade, but it was not. There was a line of small words on it, and it said, "Able to contain the world." When he flipped it over, there was another line of words on the back, and it said, "Able to contain the world." It was exactly the same as what the elders in the sect had said. He could not help but smile. It really is this thing. He pondered for a while, and then he guided the talisman. The pot moved slightly, and from the mouth of the pot floated out a clear and bright ball of air. It hovered in the air, and with just one look, he felt his entire body become clear, and his spirit was greatly increased. He could not help but nod. This was the Qian Tian Jun Yang essence. This ball of air seemed to be little, but it was actually quite a lot. If he brought it back to the sect, it would be a great contribution. If he wanted to build a cave in the future, this would be a great help. However, compared to all the qi in the pot, what he had in front of him was only a small amount. He secretly sneered. Since he was here, he would take all the qi in the pot, and not leave any for the people in Xianmen. However, his current cultivation level was still not enough to do so. Although the devil's trial had started, Xianmen was still powerful. Sun Huaying, Hua Xian, Zhang Yan, and Zhou Huang were not easy to deal with. If he were to fight them alone, he would be able to win. However, if they were to fight together, he could only retreat. If he wanted to win against them, the only way was to step into the third level of Yuanying. If he could do that, not only would his cultivation level increase greatly, he would be able to transform into the Dharmakaya of Yuanying on top of the high cloud. The illusory Yin water of calamity would also be able to cultivate the most powerful demon. It would be a piece of cake for him to wipe out all the disciples in Xianmen. His eyes slowly focused on the ball of Junyang essence. If he returned to the sect and slowly refined this item, he would most likely be able to break through the gate in less than 10 years. However, the situation was urgent now. The people in Xianmen could find this place at any time. He had to refine it in a very short period of time and swallow the qi of essence that was enough to last for 10 years into his body. If he could not suppress it, he would definitely die on the spot, and even his primordial spirit would not be able to survive. If he succeeded, he would rise to the sky in a single step. If he failed, he would die and completely disappear from the world. In the face of this life and death crisis, Feng Haiyang was also hesitant. However, he was not an ordinary person after all. After hesitating for a moment, he decisively threw it aside. He looked up at the sky and prayed silently in his heart. He said, "The luck of Xianmen is flourishing. If the heavens' will is with me, please help me, Feng Haiyang, to break through the gate and achieve Xiangong." As soon as he finished speaking, a clear brilliance burst out from his eyes. The three-high cloud above his head rotated and absorbed the wisp of Junyang essence. Chapter 585. The young Taoist flew up into the sky and stood on the clouds. He said to Zhang Yan, "Are you from Qinsang school?" Zhang Yan also slowed down and looked over, asking, "May I know who you are?" The Taoist smiled, and with a bit of arrogance, he said with his hands behind his back, "I am Ding Kun from Primordial Yang sect. I am an old friend of Chen Zi from your sect. I heard that you are one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school today. You should call me senior uncle." Zhang Yan thought for a moment. He had heard of Chen Zi's name before. This person was one of the top 10 disciples in the past, and he had only entered Dao slightly later than Qian Tian. However, during the internal strife of Qinsang school 200 years ago, this person was killed by someone with a single sword. It wasn't just this person, even the 10 great disciples of the same generation as him had been completely annihilated by him. Up until now, their corpses had probably already rotted away. This person did not know about this, and thought that he was invited by Jiuling's sect before the internal strife of Qinsang school. He said with a smile, "You are just a marionette, an evil spirit. What right do you have to be my elder?" Ding Kun said angrily, "Who is your master? Even if the teachers of Qinsang school were here, they wouldn't dare to disrespect me." Zhang Yan laughed. Even if this person was really friends with the teachers of Qinsang school, Zhang Yan did not take it to heart. He said, "I don't care where you are from, and I don't care what your identity was in the past. I just want to talk to you because you are still sane. If you know what's good for you, then move aside and let me kill the demons. If you stand in my way, I will just kill you as well." When Ding Kun heard these words, he was filled with anger. However, he was still calm and said coldly, "Since that is the case, then I will teach you a lesson on behalf of your elders. Otherwise, you will not know your place." Zhang Yan could not be bothered to talk to him anymore. He waved his sleeves, and a sword light suddenly appeared, slashing down. Ding Kun laughed coldly. The 3 clouds above him trembled, and a wisp of golden qi descended, forming 2 streaks of sword projections. One flew into the air to block the sword pellet, while the other counterattacked. Although Zhang Yan's words belittled this person, in reality, he had never looked down on his opponent. The Taoist techniques and magical treasures on him were about to move, waiting for the right opportunity to release them. However, this person only used golden qi to face the enemy and did not even use the sword plate under his feet. He immediately knew that he was being careless, so he didn't hold back any longer. He first blasted the incoming sword qi away with a bolt of divine lightning, and then he suddenly let out a loud shout. His voice resounded through the clouds, and the sword qi in midair split into 36 rays. They charged forward together. For Yan Huixin to ask this person to come out and fight, he must be extraordinary. If Yan Huixin didn't kill him in one strike, it would be troublesome once he reacted. Thus, the moment he found an opening, he immediately used his fastest method. Ding Kun did not expect Zhang Yan's flying sword technique to be so sharp. From what he knew, while there were a few sword cultivators in Qinsang school, they were not very brilliant. He had even fought against Shaoqing disciples before, so why would he care about a junior? However, at this moment, when he saw the 36 sword balls slashing through the air, the sharp and cold light coming right at his eyebrows, he was instantly shocked. He instinctively activated his spiritual power, and thousands of sword lights flew out from the cloud like a storm going against the flow. Zhang Yan smiled coldly. He used his sword light to twist the sword qi, and the sword qi was cut off. The sword light dispersed and split into 2 parts, slashing downwards. Yan Huixin watched the battle from behind. He had hoped that Ding Kun would be able to achieve something, but at this moment, he saw that Ding Kun had revealed a flaw. He thought to himself, "It's not appropriate for me to stay here. If Ding Kun wins, it's fine. But if he loses, won't I be implicated by him? Why don't I escape first?" As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, he silently rode a streak of light and flew away without looking back. Ding Kun was shocked and angry at the same time. He didn't dare to underestimate his opponent anymore. He knew that once he was suppressed by a sword cultivator, he would most likely die. Therefore, he didn't give in at all. With a shout, he raised 2 fingers and pointed outwards. A vigorous golden qi pierced through the blue sky and wrapped around the incoming sword light, slowing it down. He reached out his other hand from his sleeve and spread his fingers. A cloud of white smoke appeared and blocked another sword light that was coming at him from another direction. As for the last sword light, he could not think of anything. Thus, he could only force out all the mana in his body and desperately maintain the protective treasure light. 5 sword lights slashed down and clashed with the treasure light. However, after a series of clangs, the treasure light did not break. Ding Kun cultivated a divine art that almost no one in the primordial Yang sect could cultivate. It was called the True Spirit Eyes. It could see through the truth of Dao techniques during fights and see how powerful they were. This technique, coupled with his extremely brilliant primordial yang sword technique, allowed him to use every bit of mana perfectly. He was a cultivator who could unleash his offense and defense to the extreme. Not only that, the ordinary Dao techniques of the Devil's sect were mostly useless in front of him. It was also because of this reason that Yan Huixin's master lured him here in order to get rid of this disciple who was a great threat to the Devil's sect. With just a glance, he had already determined that the sword light was inferior to the Shaoqing sword art. Moreover, his protective treasured light had been refined with the golden hepta essence qi. He knew that a dozen sword lights would not be able to do anything to it. Now that he tried it, it indeed proved that his judgment was correct. Zhang Yan had many tricks up his sleeves. He had more than one way to kill his enemies. Even though his flying sword technique could not defeat his enemy, he had actually restrained Ding Kun. Thus, he waved his sleeve, and 300 drops of heavy serene water spilled out with a loud bang. A dim light flashed in Ding Kun's eyes. He could tell that the inconspicuous heavy water actually hid great power, and he was very anxious. In order to resist the sword force, he had already used all his skills. At this moment, he could no longer do anything. If he had a magic treasure with him, he could block it. However, because he was willing to get on the spirit flag, he had already left all his belongings to the disciples of the sect before he was imprisoned. His sleeve was already empty. At the moment of danger, he bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood at the cost of his vitality. The blood mist contained a mouthful of vital qi and baleful qi that he had refined. It was not much weaker than his natal magic sword. At this moment, it rushed out and blocked the heavy serene water as expected. Because he was extremely confident in his judgment, he did not look closely after a glance and turned his gaze away. But right at this moment, a drop of heavy water that was dark and gloomy like a speck of ink easily knocked away the blood essence and flew over. Bang! It struck onto the treasured light that protected his body, and it instantly shattered into pieces. Being hit by this sudden attack, Ding Kun's body shook and he staggered on the cloud. Blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth from the wound on his tongue. Although he had the true spirit eye, among the 365 drops of heavy water, there was only one drop of Xianming heavy water. After it mixed with the heavy water, he did not manage to see through it in a hurry and let it slip through. With this miscalculation, the magic power that was originally used to block the sword light was immediately broken. The 36 sword lights were no longer blocked and immediately rushed in. No matter how good Ding Kun was at adapting to the situation, he was helpless in this situation. He thought about how he had given up his position as a direct disciple of the Yuanyang sect for the past 200 years in order to let his dead wife reincarnate. He had become a puppet of the Yuanyang sect and was about to die here. He could not help but feel sad. At this moment, a resentful thought came out of nowhere and he said in his mind, "Even if I have to die, I will drag this person to hell with me." As soon as this thought came out of his mind, the hostility in his heart rose. He roared like a trapped beast and pointed his finger at the sky. A wisp of vital qi emerged. If one looked carefully, they would find that it was a small crystal sword that was less than half a finger long. It was condensed by pure vital qi. After it came out of the tip of his finger, it flashed and disappeared without a trace. Ding Kun had just completed this action when the sword light above his head rolled down like a waterfall. In an instant, he was dismembered by the swords, and with another twist, he was chopped into countless pieces of minced flesh that rained down. About 10 miles away from Zhang Yan, 2 sword lights were flying over. They were the Yang couple of the Yuanyang sect. Yang Bai suddenly let out a cry of surprise and stopped. He turned around and said in surprise, "My wife, did I sense it wrong? That kind of aura, isn't it our Yuanyang sect's natal magic sword?" Zhu Xian was also surprised and said, "My husband is right, I also sensed it." They looked at each other and Yang Bai said in a deep voice, "Let's go and have a look." The Yuanyang sect's natal magic sword could only be practiced by a few people in his generation. At this moment, he should still be in closed-door training. If it was an elder, he wouldn't have come here without an order. However, it was also impossible for a disciple of the Yuan-Yang sect to learn it. Most likely, it was the devil sect's doing. Therefore, the two of them decided to go and have a look. After killing Ding Kun, Zhang Yan frowned. He had a feeling that something was wrong. However, he didn't relax his mind and kept his guard up. Suddenly, a wave of coldness enveloped his upper body, and he felt as if he'd fallen into an icehouse. Right at this moment, a clear cry sounded out, and the world leaf suddenly flew out from between his brows. It took the initiative to greet a small sword that was condensed from vital energy in the sky. However, this small sword seemed to be an illusion, and it passed through the treasure without any obstruction. Zhang Yan's reaction was exceedingly sharp. At the instant the world leaf flew out, he'd already executed the minor universe teleportation and instantly teleported over 1 kilometer away, causing the small sword to turn around without any rhyme or reason and continue stabbing towards him. Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed slightly. He could feel that if he allowed this thing to attack him, it would definitely kill him. Since he started fighting with the sword, this was the first time that he had encountered something that could threaten his life. Therefore, he didn't stop and continued to use his divine abilities. His figure disappeared and reappeared in the void. Fortunately, his magic power was profound, and he was able to move more than 20 miles away in one breath. His magic power was still not exhausted. But even so, the magic sword still followed him. This sword was the natal magic sword of a cultivator of the Yuan-Yang sect. It was condensed by the cultivator's essence, qi, and spirit. It was transparent and invisible. When the sword slashed out, it would follow the qi activity of the cultivator, and it would be useless even if the target fled thousands of miles away. If there was no way to break it, the target would definitely be killed. This sword was launched by Ding Kun with anger before her death. Compared to the original extremely pure natal magic sword, it was slightly different. It was supported by a strand of evil aura that was tainted with demonic will. As long as the qi activity of the cultivator didn't dissipate, the sword would not disperse. At such a critical moment, Zhang Yan was still extremely calm. He relied on the escape art to dodge in the air. However, he couldn't continue like this. He thought to himself, everything in the world has a way to break it. This thing seems to be condensed by vital qi and killing intent. If it's like this, I can try using that thing. Chapter 586. Zhang Yan activated his teleportation ability and retreated another 10 miles, putting some distance between him and the small sword. Seeing that it couldn't catch up to him for the time being, he took out a dazzling white shuttle from his sleeve. This was the white tiger shuttle that Huxian lent to him. There was a white tiger spirit condensed by the western gold qi on it. It was also a combination of spirit and essence, and it was good at suppressing evil things. He held the shuttle in his hand, circulated his mana, and threw it out. It immediately turned into a white ray and flew in front of the small sword. Suddenly, it shone and a white tiger appeared out of thin air. It roared and pounced forward. It tore off a strand of impure qi from the sword. The sword that was as solid as crystal immediately dimmed a little. Zhang Yan saw that the spirit on the shuttle was effective. A glimmer of light flashed across his eyes. He reached out and pointed a few times. The tiger leaped back and forth a few times under his control. It tore off half of the evil spirit from the sword. But even so, the last strand of evil spirit was still controlling the small sword and moving forward. Zhang Yan saw that the spirit on the shuttle was effective. A glimmer of light flashed across his eyes. He reached out and pointed a few times. The tiger leaped back and forth a few times under his control. It tore off half of the evil spirit from the sword. But even so, the last strand of evil spirit was still controlling the small sword and moving forward. Seeing this, Zhang Yan thought for a moment and made a gesture. The white tiger's body shook and it let out a shocking roar. It leaped forward and bit. The small sword trembled when it heard the sound. At this moment, it was firmly bitten in the tiger's mouth. It tried its best to shake, but it couldn't break free. Although this sword was formed by Ding Kun's spirit, without the support of the evil spirit, it had nothing to rely on. All that was left was the purest spirit, which was slowly dispersing like smoke. If no one cared about it, it would soon disappear from the world. Even though the sword was condensed by Ding Kun's essence, without the evil spirit to support it, it had nothing to rely on. All that was left was the purest essence. It was slowly dispersing like smoke. If no one cared about it, it wouldn't take long for it to disappear from the world. With a clear sound, it returned to the aperture between his eyebrows. After dealing with this thing, he looked around again. It was empty. Yan Huixin had already escaped. He didn't know where he went. Zhang Yan changed his mind. He and Ding Kun had only fought for half an hour at most. This person wouldn't be able to escape far, so with a flip of his hand, he took out the moon-cleansing mirror. A moment later, a streak of light could be seen in the mirror, fleeing towards the north in panic. He smiled and put away the mirror. Then, he summoned his sword light and flew forward. The movement techniques of the Jiling sect were not that great. Yan Huixin did not escape far. Not long after, Zhang Yan saw a streak of light fleeing in front of him from afar. As Yan Huixin fled, he kept an eye on his back. When he saw the flying sword, he didn't know that Ding Kun had already died in the hands of Zhang Yan. This demon spirit rarely came out, so he had high hopes for him. Yet, he didn't expect him to be killed so quickly. He was filled with regret. If he had known that he wouldn't be able to delay this little bit of time, he might as well have activated the talisman and escaped from the star stone. Seeing that the sword light was getting closer and closer, he knew that he couldn't delay any longer. He hurriedly summoned Lu Muqiu in his mind and begged, "Junior Marshal Brother Lu, quickly move me away. Do you really want me to die here?" After a moment, Lu Muqiu's sigh came from the bottom of his heart. It sounded rather helpless as he said, "Senior Brother Yan, it's not that I don't want to help you. Qinsang School's Zhong Muqing and Luo Qingyu are attacking the restrictions. I have the heart, but I don't have the strength. You better pray for yourself." Yan Huixin wanted to say more, but he felt as if something in his body had been taken away. The heart and shadow synchronization technique had been removed. He was both shocked and furious. At this point, he was absolutely unable to escape, and he was forced to the point of being anxious. So he simply steeled his heart and stopped fleeing. He turned around and swung his hand, and he withdrew the 1,000 spirit life-taker knot once more. In an instant, it opened up like a net that covered the heavens and the earth. Zhang Yan had seen this treasure once, so why would he go up to it? With a turn of his sword light, he went around it. Yan Huixin secretly activated the ground imprisonment technique. When this technique was used against an enemy, if his mana was above his opponent's, he could immediately restrain his opponent and let him kill him. However, if his mana was not as strong as his opponent, he could only activate it for a moment before he could use it. Because Zhang Yan's mana was extremely strong, he was afraid that he would not be able to restrain him if he used his strength hastily. Hence, he continuously activated his Xian art. At the same time, he hid a soul-snatching curse in his ancestral aperture. This curse was a secret technique of the Jiling sect. After it was used, if it was not broken halfway, it would enter the cultivator's eyes and invade their soul. If one's mana was strong enough, one could even seize the cultivator's body and refine the cultivator into a devil spirit. This technique was extremely dangerous. If it failed, the cultivator's vitality would be greatly damaged. If it was serious, the cultivator's foundation would be destroyed. Yan Huixin had never dared to use it recklessly. However, now that he was forced into a dead end, he had already decided to go all out. He was prepared to use the technique together with the technique, hoping to succeed in one go. The sword light rushed into the sky and entered the clouds. However, in the blink of an eye, a dazzling thin line flashed by and it had already arrived in an instant. Yan Huixin propped up the protective treasure light and placed a silk scroll on top of his head, releasing a yellow light to protect his body. With his mana, be it the ground imprisonment technique or the soul-snatching curse, he could only use them when the opponent was within 300 feet of him. Before that, he would definitely be attacked by the flying sword. Hence, he could only wait for an opportunity. His idea was brilliant. However, when Zhang Yan was 1,000 feet away, he glanced at it and smiled. However, he did not come forward at all. He first shook his sleeves and the sword light suddenly separated, shooting out without a trace. Then, he pointed forward, and a spot of clear light flew out from between his brows. It flew swiftly and fixed the silk scroll in place. Then, a yellow light rose from the high cloud above his head. With a rumble, the yellow giant hand stretched out and expanded to 1,000 feet in the blink of an eye. It covered the sky and the earth. It grabbed Yan Huixin, who did not know how to deal with it, and held him in the palm of its hand. Yan Huixin was so shocked that his spirit was about to scatter. He shouted, "Fellow Taoist, please wait. I am willing to offer the talisman order." Zhang Yan ignored him and activated his mana. The 5 fingers of the yellow giant hand grabbed him fiercely and pinched him to death. His expression did not change. He waved his sleeve and rolled up a shining talisman order and kept it in his sleeve. At this moment, 2 streaks of golden light flew over from not too far away. When they were about 1,000 feet away, the light scattered, and Yang Bai and Zhu Exan walked out hand in hand. The couple just happened to see this scene, and they couldn't help but be greatly shocked. Although they knew that Zhang Yan was not ordinary, they did not expect him to be so strong. He defeated a disciple of the devil's sect in an instant, and with such ease, as if he did not use any strength at all. They could not help but feel a lot of fear towards him. Yang Bai thought to himself, this person must be on good terms with. A smile appeared on his face. He went forward and bowed, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Zhu Exan also followed behind a Wan Fu. Zhang Yan looked at the 2 of them and returned the greeting. He smiled, "So it is fellow Taoist Yang and fellow Taoist Zhu. I did not expect the 2 of you to come here as well. What a coincidence." Yang Bai was afraid that he would misunderstand that they were here to fight for the talisman order. He hurriedly explained, "The 2 of us saw from afar someone using the divine sword art of our Yuanyang sect. We wanted to come over to take a look, but we did not expect that Taoist Zhang would be here. This is unnecessary. With Taoist Zhang's ability, I think you should be able to deal with Yu Ru." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed and he said, "I am just now fighting with Jiuling sect's Yan Huixin. This person has a devil spirit, so he should be from your sect. I think what you saw was the divine art that he used." Yang Bai came to a realization, "I see." He also knew what was going on and did not pursue the matter further. He took the initiative to change the topic and said, "Taoist Zhang, why don't we go together to look for the Junyang pot?" Zhang Yan smiled, hearing fellow Taoist Yang's words, "You seem to know where the Junyang pot is?" Yang Bai hurriedly shook his head, "That pot has already developed a spirit and can run around on its own. How would I know where it is? It's just that on this Star Stone Road, there is a flying peak. There was once a senior expert who built a temple there. Why don't we go there and check it out first?" Zhang Yan did not mind, so he agreed. The 3 of them flew towards the center of the road. After traveling for a while, they heard a rumble in front of them. They could already see the explosive qi and lightning from hundreds of miles away. It seemed like someone was attacking the formation. The 3 of them looked at each other and did not say much. They sped up their flying lights by a lot. After traveling for another dozens of miles, the sound became clearer. It sounded much more intense than just now. Zhang Yan looked up and saw the spiritual opportunity that shot through the clouds. It seemed to be the Dharma of the Qinsang school. He immediately turned back and said, "You too, I will go first." Yang Bai and his wife were about to reply, but before they could open their mouths, they saw a blur in front of them. A sword light had already shot into the sky and flew far away. Zhu Exan was stunned. She could not help but say, "Husband, fellow Taoist Zhang's sword escape technique is so fast. I'm afraid it's not inferior to the Shaoqing disciples. Yang Bai was also looking at it in a daze. He nodded and said, although it's still inferior to the Shaoqing supreme sword lineage, it's far above us now. If we can retrieve Jun Yang's Qi of Essence, Madam and I can go back to practice the Heaven's Azure Clouds technique. No matter how powerful his escape technique is, he can only be controlled by me. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, a huge peak with beautiful mountains and rivers appeared in front of them. There were pavilions, terraces, and waterside pavilions. At this moment, Zhang Yan was standing on the top of a temple, talking to two tall and slender cultivators. So it's fellow Taoist Zhong and fellow Taoist Luo from the Qinsang school. Yang Bai and Zhu Xian immediately stopped their flying lights and went forward to greet him. The two disciples from the Qinsang school did not have much of a relationship with them. Zhong Muqing only returned their greeting as a greeting. Luo Qingyu, on the other hand, smiled and responded in a clear voice. He did not seem to be distant at all. Yang Bai looked to the side and saw a pot in Luo Qingyu's hand. He asked in surprise, "Senior brother, is that the Junyang pot?" Luo Qingyu smiled and did not say anything. He flicked his sleeve and threw the pot over. Yang Bai's spirits rose, and he raised his hand to receive it. But after taking a look, he was disappointed, and said, "So it's a fake." He looked at it a few more times and sighed, "It's very similar. It's hard to tell if it's real or not." Luo Qingyu smiled and said, "Both of us came here because of this item. Although we thought that it was a fake item, we would not be satisfied if we did not take a look at it. It's a pity that Lu Muqiu managed to escape. Otherwise, we could have gotten a talisman." Yang Bai also said it was a pity. He looked to his left and right and asked curiously, "Since both of you are here, why don't I see perfected Hua from your sect?" Chapter 587. When Luo Qingyu heard Yang Bai asking about Hua Xian, he smiled and said, "Senior Martial Brother Hua must have encountered some enemies along the way, that's why he hasn't arrived yet." Yang Bai was surprised and asked, "If that's the case, why didn't the both of you seek help?" Luo Qingyu said casually, "Senior Martial Brother Hua is the top 10 disciples of our Qinsang school. His mana and supernatural powers are better than mine and Senior Martial Brother Zhong's. He should be able to handle his opponents. I have already sent a letter to contact him. I believe he will come after a while." Yang Bai was puzzled and asked, if fellow Taoist Hua Xian was besieged by the disciples of the Devil's Doctrine. Zhong Muqing turned his gaze and said, "Senior Martial Brother Hua is not stupid. If he was besieged, how could he not seek help from the Golden Sword sect? The more there is no news, the more it means that he is fine." Yang Bai could hear the sarcasm in his words and could not help but feel slightly embarrassed. Luo Qingyu noticed his unnatural expression and laughed. "Earlier on, I saw fellow Taoists from the 4 sects coming up to the Star Stone together. Could it be that the two of you have not seen any traces of fellow Taoists from the other sects along the way?" Yang Bai sighed and said, "To be honest, not long after my wife and I arrived, we encountered the disciple of the Nether Spring sect, Feng Haiyang. The two of us, together with the disciples of Taihao, Mount Lishan, and Nanhua, thought that we would be able to take him down. However, we did not expect his Tao's supernatural powers to be so amazing and his mana to be so high. Other than my wife and I, the other fellow Taoists from the 3 sects, have either died or escaped." His words caused Zaizhong and Luo Yunyang to reveal astonished expressions. Zhang Yan's eyes also flickered for a moment. Zhong Muqing frowned and asked, "Is Feng Haiyang that powerful?" Yang Bai said very seriously, "I have not spoken the slightest bit of falsehood." Zhu Xian saw that the people from Qinsang school did not speak and it was obvious that they still had doubts about this. She knew that even if a disciple of a great sect that had existed for over 10,000 years like Haizang treated the two of them rather amiably, he might not think highly of them. Thus, the weight of his words was much lighter, so she couldn't help but sigh and stand out as well. She said, "Although my wife and I are not as powerful as fellow Taoists, we will not purposely elevate this person to cover our incompetence." Luo Qingyu smiled and said, Madam Yang. You and fellow Taoist Yang are both talented disciples of the Yuan Yang sect, so we can trust you. Since you and your wife have been fighting with this man for quite some time, why don't you tell us about his magical abilities? If we run into him next time, we won't be in a mess. Yang Bai hurriedly said, Of course. The whereabouts of the Yuxiao school disciples were still unknown, and Shaoqing sect's Sun Huaying was nowhere to be found. Based on the current situation, it seemed that only by relying on the Qinsang school could they obtain Jun Yang's spiritual essence, so they didn't hide anything. They told him everything that had happened during the fight in detail, especially Feng Haiyang's strange and unpredictable death substitution technique. Luo Qingyu and Zhong Muqing's expressions turned solemn. If they couldn't break the death substitution technique, even if they encountered this person, they wouldn't be able to deal with him. After listening, Zhang Yan thought to himself, the disciples of the four sects only encountered Feng Haiyang. That's interesting. Just now, Lu Muqiu of the Hunqing sect escaped from here. Yan Huixin of the Jiling sect and Gao Ruowang of the Blood Soul sect have already been killed by me. Senior brother Hua hasn't arrived yet, so he must have encountered the disciples of the Devil sect. The person who is fighting with him must be either Yuqi Yun or Sun Yangzi. Northwest of the Star Stone. About 400 miles away from the middle road, Sun Yangzi stood on a white jade Ganoderma. She held a 6-hole pottery sun in her hands and put it to her lips to play. Her fingers danced, playing up and down. But every time she played, there was no sound, only wisps of dense smoke came out. This was the supernatural power of the Origin Mirage sect, called Time Like a Year. Anyone who was enveloped by this chi would be dragged into the mirage without needing to invade the body. All kinds of illusions would be created, causing one's mind to be bewitched and their vitality to gradually lose until their spirit, chi, and spirit were all lost. What was more amazing was that this technique could not only trigger the 7 emotions and 6 desires of the opponent, but it could also create powerful enemies to attack the cultivator. If the opponent was killed by the enemy in the illusion, a part of their mana and spirit would be taken away, becoming the owner of the technique. This cloud of smoke covered a radius of more than 100 miles. Even with the mirage chi that Sun Yangzi had cultivated in her chest, she still couldn't create such a big movement. She was only able to do it by relying on the treasured puppet in her hand that was given by the sect. In the mirage chi, Hua Xian stood with his eyes closed. His body was as straight as a javelin, and his will was especially strong. He had already defeated 3 powerful enemies that were created by the illusion, and now he was fighting with the 4th. Sun Yangzi was drenched in sweat at this moment, and she was short of breath. Her face was pale, and her entire body was lightly trembling. Obviously, her mana was about to be exhausted. Fighting in the illusory realm wasn't harmful to her. Every time an illusion was killed, it was equivalent to cutting off a part of her soul. If this person was killed as well, even if she didn't die, she would be exhausted and wouldn't have the strength to fight back. But what made her even more uneasy was that she had already barely held on for an hour, but she still couldn't sense anything in her heart, and she couldn't help but feel anxious. She took out a red medicinal pill from her pouch and put it under her tongue. She slightly gathered her spirit and called out in her mind. However, after 10 minutes, there was still no response. Just as she was hesitating whether to ignore Hua Xian and retreat by herself, she heard Lu Muqiu's tired voice in her heart and said, I have just escaped from a dangerous situation. Junior sister Su, please hold on for a while longer. Wait for me to cast a spell to move you here. Hearing this, Sun Yangzi's beautiful eyes lit up, and she slightly cheered up. With a light shout, she squeezed out a little more mana, puffed her cheeks, and blew, forcing out a strand of grayish-white mirage chi from the treasured sun, and it blended into the mist. After a dozen breaths, she saw a flag descending from the sky, fluttering within 50 feet in front of her, and the door inside was wide open. Sun Yangzi's heart was relieved. As long as she entered the flag, there was no need to fight with this great enemy in front of her. However, she couldn't immediately retreat at this time. Otherwise, once Huxian woke up from the illusion, he would definitely come to kill her at the first moment. If she fought with this person head-on, she was definitely not his opponent. She frowned and thought for a while. She stood up and stomped on the ground. The snow jade Ganoderma under her feet flew up, and she silently made a gesture. The Ganoderma suddenly grew taller, and the Ganoderma's cover also grew bigger and bigger. Just now, it stopped when it reached the size of 1,000 feet. Seeing the Ganoderma was surrounded by clouds and mist, emitting a deep auspicious light, she couldn't help but lightly sigh of relief. With this treasure blocking for a moment, even if Huxian broke out of the Mirage realm, she would be fine. This blood Ganoderma was a gift from a good friend of hers, and it had been with her for 100 years. It had the effect of calming one's heart and mind, which was greatly beneficial to cultivation. In times of crisis, it could also be used to resist the attack of magic weapons. She loved it very much. If she still had mana in her body, she would definitely take it with her. Although it was a pity to give it up like this, it was still better than losing her life here. Finally, she reluctantly looked at the Ganoderma, stood up, and used the last bit of mana to withdraw her supernatural power. She flew up with the help of the wind and jumped into the flag. However, before she could reach the banner, she heard a clear and melodious sound. Although it was not sharp, her head seemed to have been fiercely struck by a sledgehammer. She let out a shrill cry as blood sprayed from her eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, and she fell backwards. Before her body fell, a coiled dragon golden spear flew out from the Mirage Chi and pierced through the Ganoderma like a piece of paper. With another crack, it pierced under her right rib and came out from her left waist. The huge force carried by the spear sent her body flying out until she was nailed on a mountain rock. Just now, she stopped. At the same time, the flag seemed to be hit by something invisible. The flag trembled and let out a wail before shattering immediately. On a high cliff 1,000 miles away, Lu Muchio was originally sitting cross-legged on the ground. He felt a sweetness in his throat and spurted out a mouthful of blood, staining the front of his shirt. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Nine mountains pure sound." He covered his mouth and coughed twice, revealing a bitter smile on his face. His flag was broken, and in a short period of time, besides himself, no one else would be able to use the supernatural power of teleportation. Within the Mirage Chi, a gust of strong wind slowly revolved. Everywhere it passed, the haze was dispersed, and the thick mist gradually dispersed as well. Huxian's sleeves hung at his sides as he walked out slowly. Although he was dragged into the Mirage realm, he'd used it to temper his will and state of mind after successively killing a few enemies, and he'd obtained great benefits instead. When he came out, he looked at the surroundings in a very composed manner, and only after confirming that there were no enemies nearby did he look towards Sun Yangzi. Because this woman was nailed by the great sun dragon sparrow spear, even her spirit couldn't escape, so she wasn't dead yet. Blood flowed from the corners of her mouth as she looked at Huxian with her beautiful eyes, and she sighed sadly. "If I don't retreat, how would I know the outcome of the battle?" Huxian said in a low voice, "It was just a good dream, so how could it disturb my state of mind?" After he finished speaking, the golden-red cloud above his head spun and released a ball of scorching fire. With a bang, it landed on the mountain top, and Sun Yangzi's body and spirit were completely incinerated. Huxian identified the direction, leaped up, and immediately transformed into a blazing golden flame that tore through the sky and flew towards the Starstone Road. After traveling for a moment, he suddenly saw a letter floating in front of him. He immediately stopped and stretched out his hand to receive it. He opened it and read it, nodded, and casually destroyed the letter. Then, he flew forward again. After almost an hour, he saw a beautiful flying peak in front of him, and a few familiar figures were waiting there. He was just about to go forward and greet them when he suddenly heard a loud noise that seemed like a myriad of tides rushing by his ears. He looked over in surprise, and his eyes narrowed. At the southeast of the Star Stone, there was a stream of black water that floated above the surface of the sky, and countless flying mountains that were thousands of meters in size revolved and danced madly along with it. It looked like gravel in a storm, and there were even rays of black light that flew out in all directions, and the impetus was extremely shocking. Hu Xian's expression was incomparably solemn. Such a phenomenon was obviously the result of someone making great progress in cultivation and breaking through a bottleneck, and it caused the spiritual energy in this place to become chaotic. When a disciple of the profound sect broke through, there was absolutely no such violent phenomenon, so it could only be someone from the devil sect. He looked at the surging river that was pitch black like ink, and he already knew who it was. Ocean of Wind. Chapter 588. Hu Xian looked at it for a while longer and suddenly thought of something. His heart sank and he immediately flew up. Before he reached the peak. Looking at the scene from afar, his eyes lit up and he thought, so the two junior martial brothers are with junior martial brother Zhang, and the young couple of Yuan Yang sect are also here. Great, it's not too late. Zhang Yan suddenly felt something. He turned around and saw a golden-red light coming from the sky and landed on the peak. He smiled and said, so it's senior martial brother Hua. Everyone looked over and saw that it was Hu Xian. They were all happy and stepped on the clouds to greet him. Hu Xian hurriedly returned their greetings. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, he said, everyone, I believe that you all saw the strange phenomenon just now. Judging from the spiritual opportunity, Feng Haiyang of the Netherworld Spring sect has stepped into the third stage. I believe that this person most likely borrowed the help of Jun Yang's essence to break through. It seems that the Jun Yang pot is most likely in his hands. We should take advantage of the fact that he has just broken through and his cultivation is not stable to find a way to kill him and get rid of this great threat. The more he spoke, the more murderous his voice became. Hearing his words, Luo Qing and Zhong Muqing seemed to realize something and their expressions turned serious. Zhong Muqing thought for a while and agreed, what senior martial brother Hua said is true. If the Jun Yang pot is really in this person's hands, we should kill him as soon as possible. Zhang Yan nodded. Hu Xian was indeed the first among the 10 disciples. He could see the key point of this matter with just one look. Zhu Xian, however, was a little puzzled. She asked privately, husband, even if Feng Haiyang has the cultivation of the third level of the nascent soul realm, there's no need to fear him with so many Taoists here. Why is spiritual master Hua in such a hurry? Wouldn't it be better to kill this person after meeting up with fellow Taoists from Yuxiao sect and Shaoqing sect? Yang Bai sighed and looked a little worried. He shook his head and said, it's not that simple. Fellow Hua's concern is very reasonable. This time, it's really troublesome. Hu Xian turned around to look at Zhang Yan, and his expression was extremely solemn as he said, Junior brother Zhang, what do you think? If only the three of them went to fight Feng Haiyang, they wouldn't be able to do so. He wasn't completely confident, but with Zhang Yan's help, the odds of success would greatly increase. However, Zhang Yan was now one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school. He also had another identity, which was the Grand Elder of the Yaoyin clan. He could not force it. Zhang Yan smiled and said, what senior brother Hua said is right. If the Jun Yang pot is in the hands of this person, who would be able to remain unscathed? When Hu Xian heard this, he knew that Zhang Yan was just like him. He had already seen through the crux of the matter and couldn't help but slowly nod his head. Yang Bai was a little hesitant at first, but after some consideration, she made up her mind and hurried over. He cupped his hands and said, my wife and I are also willing to join you in exterminating evil and defending the Tao. Hu Xian nodded cheerfully and said, good. It's best that fellow Yang and his wife are willing to help out. He looked around and said, everyone, any delay may lead to unforeseen changes. Follow me quickly to exterminate this evil. After saying that, he took the lead in casting a golden light and moved forward. Without hesitation, the others also activated their escape techniques and followed behind. Zhang Yan thought for a while. He originally wanted to use the moon cleansing mirror to investigate first, but he was afraid of alerting the enemy, so he gave up on this idea. He took out a flying letter from his sleeve and used his finger as a pen to write a few words with his xian qi before sending it out. Then, he drove a sword light and caught up with the others in an instant. The group of people were not in a hurry when they were flying. No one knew if Feng Haiyang would turn around and look for trouble with them, so they were very cautious. Although the people from Qinsang School had the lofty cloud watchtower with them, and if they released it, they wouldn't be afraid of being attacked by a strong enemy. However, there was a disadvantage to every advantage. Maintaining this item required a large amount of mana. Not only did it not have the ability to attack, it was also very slow. To those who were good at flying, it was like a turtle crawling. Therefore, no one was willing to use it unless it was a critical moment. After traveling for more than an hour, the 6 of them arrived at the place where the spiritual vigor was stirring. They knew that they might be facing a strong enemy like Feng Haiyang, so they did not split up. Instead, they gathered together and carefully searched everywhere. However, when they searched all the flying peaks and rocks around, they realized that there was no trace of anyone. It seemed like the person had already gone far away. Hu Xian secretly sighed. This was what he was most worried about. If Feng Haiyang was willing to fight them head-on, it would be a good thing for them. Unfortunately, things did not turn out as they wished. If they missed this opportunity, it would be even more difficult to kill this person. After thinking for a while, his expression was unusually serious. He said in a deep voice, "Everyone, from now on, you must be careful. Do not travel alone." Feng Haiyang seemed to have only leveled up by 1 level. It was just that his cultivation experience had improved a lot. He should not be able to fight against all of them together. However, things were not that simple. This person did not need to fight them head-on at all. All he had to do was hide and cultivate. With the spiritual qi here, his cultivation experience would definitely increase day by day until the Dexian sect could no longer resist. On the contrary, because the Junyang pot was in the hands of this person, the people from the Dexian sect had to either choose to fight him or admit defeat in the sword fight. It could be said that they had the upper hand. Zhang Yan thought for a while and suddenly said, "Senior Hua, in my opinion, we still have a chance." "Oh." Hu Xian's spirit was slightly lifted. He said, "Please tell us, junior brother Zhang." Zhang Yan smiled. "Feng Haiyang might not be going to avoid us. If I were him, I would look for a fellow Taoist from the Dexian sect who was alone. Therefore, he might be looking for trouble with fellow Taoists from the Shaoqing sect or the Yuxiao sect." Hu Xian nodded slowly and agreed. "Junior brother, what you said makes sense. However, we don't know where those fellow Taoists are. It's not appropriate to look for them separately. What can we do?" Zhang Yan smiled. "It's fine. I have a treasure mirror that can detect the traces of everything within a few hundred miles. Just now, I'm afraid that I'll scare Feng Haiyang away. It would not be nice, so I didn't take it out. Now, I can use it." As he spoke, he took out the moon cleansing mirror. Hu Xian was overjoyed. He said, "With this, the Dexian sect still has a chance of winning. Junior brother, please cast your spell." Zhang Yan held the mirror in his hand and aimed it at the north. He used his mana slightly and a ray of mirror light shot out. It scanned up and down, but after the time it took to burn an incense stick, there was no trace of anyone. He then scanned the east, but there was still no one. He then turned to the south. Halfway there was a sudden flash of blinding light. The mirror was blurred and nothing could be seen clearly. He thought about it and guessed that it was Zhou Huang's doing, but he didn't care. He smiled and skipped over it. He turned to the west again, and this time, he found something. He saw sword qi crisscrossing, and a fierce battle was taking place. He focused and said, "It's Shinrin Sun." Looking at the situation, he seems to be fighting with Yuchi Yun from the Bone sect. He shifted the mirror light and found a faint yellow smoke escaping forward. If one did not look carefully, it would be hard to notice. He squinted his eyes and said, "Everyone, please take a look." However, the yellow smoke seemed to have noticed him as well. It immediately turned yellow and disappeared without a trace. However, while everyone had only caught a glimpse of it, they could immediately tell that Feng Haiyang was about to attack Sun Huaying from both sides, just as Zhang Yan had said. If this Shaoqing disciple died, the Daoist sect would lose an extremely important combat force. Hu Xian pondered for a while and looked up at Zhang Yan. He said seriously, "Junior brother Zhang, your escape technique is the best among us. You also have the mirror with you. Why don't you go ahead and help Shinran Sun? We will follow after." Zhang Yan smiled and agreed without hesitation. He cupped his hands and said, "Everyone, I'll go first." With that, he leaped and rode the sword light deep into the clouds, rushing to the west. Zhang Yan knew that Feng Haiyang would not insist on taking Sun Huaying's life after being discovered by the mirror light. He might even retreat in advance. Apart from that, there was another possibility, which was that he went to find trouble with Zhou Huang. If that was the case, it proved that he was right. The cultivators of the demon sect also had techniques or treasures that could detect everyone. As for Zhou Huang's life and death, if he did not counter the mirror light just now, he would not have been stingy to mention it to Hu Xian and the others due to the fact that they were all enemies. Now, he could only let Zhou Huang perish on his own. At the south of the Star Rock, Zhou Huang summoned the mausoleum mirror that was hanging above and kept it in his palm. He sneered. Just now, when the mirror light came over, he realized that it was Zhang Yan who was searching for him. Although he didn't know what Zhang Yan's goal was, he didn't want his whereabouts to be exposed so easily. Thus, he immediately used the mirror in his hand to reflect it back. The two mirrors were a pair, and the sun mirror could restrain the moon mirror. Thus, Zhang Yan was easily defeated. Zhou Huang looked around and raised the mirror in his hand. He waved it in a certain direction, and a ray of light shot out. Although his fellow sect members were all dead and he was the only one walking, he did not have any scruples because he had the magical power of the heavenly cycle square. After looking carefully for an hour, Zhou Huang did not find anything. He thought to himself, "I haven't found any traces of the Junyang pot along the way. Could it have been taken away by the cultivators of the devil sect?" He frowned unconsciously. If that was the case, it would be troublesome. Just now when Feng Haiyang achieved the third stage of yuanying, the strange phenomenon that he displayed stirred up a large amount of spiritual vigor. At that time, he was still far away. Although he did not see it, he felt it from afar. He thought that if the treasure fell into the hands of this person, he would definitely not be able to snatch it back with his own strength. However, he was not willing to join forces with the disciples of the other sections. After thinking carefully, he thought, Hu Xian, Sun Huaying and the others want to take the Junyang spirit qi. They will definitely bump into the cultivators of the devil sect. There is no need for me to be anxious. I can take action when that time comes. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly felt something strange. There seemed to be a cold air invading his muscles and bones. He suddenly turned around. 100 feet away, a long river of black water suddenly appeared in the void. There was a person standing on the water. His black hair was loose and he wore a yellow robe. The most eye-catching thing was that there was not a single cloud on his head. When he saw Zhou Huang looking over, he bowed and said, "Fellow Zhou, I am here to take your life." Chapter 589. The Yuanying Body. Zhou Huang's heart skipped a beat. With just one glance, he could tell that Feng Haiyang's nascent soul had flown over. If it was said that he was confident that he could suppress Feng Haiyang earlier, then at this moment, he had no confidence at all. After Feng Haiyang broke through, no matter if it was cultivation, magic power, or divine abilities, Feng Haiyang was superior to him in every aspect. If it was a head-on battle, Feng Haiyang was absolutely not a match that he could go against on his own. So when Feng Haiyang spoke, he made a prompt decision and utilized the universal core technique to teleport away. 3 Yuanying cultivators could lock down heaven and earth. Under normal circumstances, no matter how good a cultivator's teleportation technique was, it would be useless in front of them. However, Zhou Huang was from the Jade Sky sect after all. Even though he had suddenly encountered a great enemy, he did not show the slightest hint of panic. Instead, he calmly judged that although Feng Haiyang's Fa Li had greatly improved, it was definitely impossible for him to master this technique to such a perfect and proficient state in such a short amount of time. As long as he moved fast enough, he was still confident that he could escape. Just as he had predicted, his teleportation technique was unusually smooth. He did not encounter any obstacles. In the blink of an eye, he was thousands of feet away. However, this was not enough to say that he was out of danger. The Yuanying body was not made of flesh and blood. It was the embodiment of a cultivator's Yuanying essence. When it flew, it moved like a rainbow and was as fast as lightning. Not only could it be used easily, but it was also much more powerful than normal. In addition to the Nether Spring sect's Nether Escape technique, Feng Haiyang would be able to catch up to him in a short amount of time. Running away would not help him escape and would only speed up his death. Therefore, the moment Zhou Huang summoned his teleportation technique, he secretly summoned the spiritual jade light of the spiritual pivot. He was waiting for his enemy to get close to him so he could attack him head-on. Even if he could not kill him, as long as he could injure him, he would be able to escape easily. His plan was not bad. If it was a normal opponent, he would not be able to escape. If he ran away without saying a word, his opponent would think that he was scared out of his wits and would chase after him without a second thought. If he was caught off guard, he might have been able to get his hands on him. However, Feng Haiyang was different. Though his qi was much higher than Zhou Huang's, he was still very cautious. He did not rush forward immediately. Seeing Zhang Xian's reaction, Zhou Huang harumphed, knowing that his scheme had failed. He immediately gave up on this thought and fled with all his might. Feng Haiyang shook his dharmakaya and turned it into a wisp of yellow smoke. He hung far behind and was not in a hurry to catch up. Looking from afar, one chased and the other fled. It was as if he was chasing away his prey. Zhou Huang frowned deeply. How could he not understand Feng Haiyang's plan? It was obvious that Feng Haiyang wanted to wear down Zhou Huang's qi and attack him when he was exhausted. But even though he knew this, he had no other choice. Even though Feng Haiyang's heaven and earth sealing technique wasn't very proficient, he was still able to control it. However, as long as he was not careful, he would be trapped inside, and he would not be able to escape. At this moment, he only had one way left. If he could meet up with the other cultivators in the celestial sect of wonders before his magic power was exhausted, he would be able to avoid this calamity. Zhou Huang's expression turned extremely ugly. Ever since he entered the Tao, when had he ever been in such a sorry state? If there was a chance in the future, he would definitely return the favor 100-fold. However, just as he thought that Feng Haiyang would continue to follow him, he saw the yellow smoke suddenly dart forward. In the blink of an eye, the distance between the two of them was reduced by more than half. At the same time, within 1,000 feet of him, a strange demon suddenly appeared out of thin air and went straight for him. This demon looked extremely ferocious, and no one knew what it was capable of. The devil doctrine had many strange Taoist techniques, and it was impossible to guard against them. Zhou Huang did not dare to recklessly face it. Without thinking, he immediately used the heavenly cycle square and dodged again. Unexpectedly, right at this moment, the devil actually turned around, and with a crack, it bit onto the maze sun mirror that floated at its side and refused to let go. He did not expect this, and it was too late to stop it. As his body shifted, he could only watch as the treasured mirror was taken away. When he reappeared thousands of feet away, Zhou Huang's expression was extremely gloomy. He had already understood that Feng Haiyang had his eyes on this treasured mirror from the beginning. Once he lost this item, the possibility of him meeting up with the other cultivators in the celestial sect of wonders was extremely slim. Although the two of them had not officially fought, he had already lost a move. At the same time, west of the Star Stone. Sun Huaying pointed with her finger, and an elusive sword light flew out. When it reached the distant sky, it suddenly disappeared and reappeared dozens of feet away. At this moment, it had already caught up to the back of a cultivator in white who was hastily escaping. With a flash of brilliance, the person was cut in half from head to toe. The sword light trembled with a hum, and after a leap, it leaped back to the side of the person, transforming into a wisp of clear light that flew in circles. He calmly looked towards the sky, and there appeared another cultivator who looked exactly the same as before. If an ordinary cultivator had fought to this point and still been unable to kill their opponent, they would have long been discouraged and would not be able to muster up the slightest bit of fighting spirit. However, the expression on his face was still the same as when he first made his move. There was no change, and there was not the slightest hint of impatience. It was as if he deeply believed in his heart that he only needed to slash and slash to kill his opponent. Yu Qiyun floated high in the sky. The muscles on his face were stiff, and it was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. However, his eyes revealed a deep fear. It was as if this kind of incomparably firm and mountain-like willpower gave rise to an indescribable feeling of fear from the bottom of his heart. Other than Feng Haiyang, the other 6 disciples of the Devil's Sect had been selected by the sect more than 100 years ago. Although they were not necessarily the most tyrannical among their peers, each and every one of them had an extremely deep understanding of a Dao technique. For example, Yu Qiyun, for the past 100 years, he had specialized in this white bone substitute death technique and abandoned all other Dao techniques. When he came out to fight, he had the help of the 6 elders of the Devil's Sect. It could be said that he was the most difficult person to kill out of the 6. However, up until now, more than 2 hours had already passed. The 30,000 baleful white bone soldiers that he had originally brought had already been killed by Sun Huaying. It was indeed extremely difficult for him to last for 6 hours like he had originally expected. However, Yu Qiyun was not someone who followed the rules. Although Feng Haiyang had said that he would delay this person, he did not only defend but not attack. He had also tried to counterattack, but no matter if it was a magical treasure or a Dao technique, it would be destroyed by the sword light without exception. Thus, after fighting for a moment, he completely gave up on this idea and only used the baleful white bone soldiers to tangle with this person. However, although this technique was very profound, it was not without flaws. Among the 30,000 baleful white bone soldiers, 6 of them were formed from his own blood essence and spirit. When he died in place of them, they would also appear. However, even if these 6 soldiers were cut down, he would not be able to sense it. If they were all destroyed, he would still die. Thus, he was also trembling with fear, afraid that the next moment would be the moment of his death. It could be said that this divine ability completely depended on the cultivator's own luck and the depth of their Dao techniques. It was already not easy for him to last until now. In the thousands of years since the founding of the Bone sect, there were some unlucky seniors who died after being killed 6 times. Thus, the more he used the death substitution technique, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Just 45 minutes ago, Lu Muqiu's heart-shadow simultaneous illumination technique was also mysteriously cut off. Coincidentally, at this moment, a bright light shone through the sky and suddenly flashed past. This caused him to be in a state of confusion. It seemed that this situation was either Lu Muqiu being killed, or something had happened to his original arrangements. Although he did not show any panic on the surface, he was also seriously considering his path of retreat. With the 10,000 miles wide ruler technique, wanting to escape from the Shaoqing sword cultivators was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. However, with the death substitution technique, if he wanted to escape, he might be able to think of a way. At this moment, his heart trembled. He saw that one of the soldiers just now had been killed, and the corner of his eyes couldn't help but twitch. He hurriedly used the technique and waved his sleeve. On a flying peak, a cloud of white smoke rose, then gathered in the air. Suddenly, 36 thick clouds of qi appeared. A person walked out from each of them, and every one of them looked exactly the same. Since the start of the battle, this was the first time Yuchi-yun had summoned so many Bone-in soldiers at once. A cold light burst out from Sun Huaying's eyes. His state of mind was clear, and his senses were extremely sharp. He immediately felt that this opponent had already had the intention to retreat. Without needing to think too much, it was either that he didn't have many Bone-in soldiers left, or something else had happened, causing him to be unable to continue fighting with him. As expected, among the 36 people, 12 of them took the initiative to pounce towards him, while the remaining 24 suddenly got up and flew in 3 directions. Yuchi-yun's move was also a gamble. With the technique of the In Bone sect, as long as one of the baleful In soldiers escaped, he would be able to leave safely. However, if his luck wasn't good, and those 36 soldiers just happened to have those 6 bodies of vital essence hidden within them, then his soul would immediately scatter. Sun Huaying waved his sword, and an arc of light flew out 1,000 feet away. With a sweep, it cut the 12 Yuchi-yuns flying over into 2. Then, it turned into a sword and leapt up, first going to the southern corner, and with another slash, the 18 soldiers that were gathered together were all beheaded. Then, it went to the east. After a while, this streak of light had already turned half around, and turned towards the last direction. At this moment, in the direction of the north, Zhang Yan was riding on the sword light, flying through the heavy clouds. The Shaoqing sword technique was extremely sharp, and its momentum was extraordinary. Before he got close, he could already see the soaring sword chi from afar. So, he suppressed the flying light, and didn't rush over. Instead, he first took a few glances, and waved his sleeve, dispersing the sword pellet, setting up the 4 corners. Then, he picked up the mirror light, and shone it in all directions. What Feng Haiyang would choose was completely up to a single thought. Maybe this person wouldn't go find Zhou Huang, but beat him at his own game, lying in ambush in the surroundings, waiting for a chance to kill him. It wasn't impossible, but there was no need to be anxious about Sun Huaying. So, he acted calmly, and calmly investigated. After a while, he confirmed that there were no problems, and kept the mirror. At this moment, he suddenly sensed something, and raised his head to look. He saw a few people flying towards him, all of them wearing white robes and tall hats. Not only were their clothes the same, even their appearances were the same, as if they were twins. He smiled, and waved his sleeves, standing with his hands behind his back, saying, "Fellow Taoist Yuchi, you seem to be in a hurry. Where are you going?" Chapter 590. Yuchi-yun raised his head and looked. His entire body trembled. Zhang Yan. During the sword duel at Chengyuan Gorge, Zhang Yan had used the mysterious yellow giant hand to cross 50 miles of the river in one move to attack him. The strength of the magical power made him incomparably shocked. Now that he saw it again, he knew that he was no match for it. He hurriedly stopped his body, and the 18 spirit white bone-in soldiers suddenly split up, scurrying to 2 sides. Zhang Yan smiled and didn't chase after them. The sword light around him was enough to stop them for a while. He shook his body slightly, the astral cloud above his head vibrated, and the aura around him moved. The sound of waves could be heard under his feet, and layers of water light surged like a flood. Yuchi-yun heard the loud noise behind him and turned back, but he was shocked. The reason he came to duel this time was to deal with Sun Huaying. While the Shaoqing killing sword was sharp beyond compare, and could be said to be invincible in a one-on-one battle, if it was taken away by the absorption divine art, then there would be nothing he could do. Zhang Yan's water element true light was coincidentally able to restrain him, so he hurriedly sped up. But before he could get far, several sword lights flew up, and the 8 baleful In Bone soldiers were cut down at the same time. One of them swayed, and a formless aura seemed to spurt out. It turned into a solid body, and continued to escape into the distance. However, he didn't have any teleportation techniques, and his escape technique was just average. The sword light turned and arrived behind him, cutting him into 2 again. When his incarnation appeared again, the water element true light behind him had already caught up, and with a sweep of his head, it was sucked into the true light. Zhang Yan made a hand seal, and the water light slowly retracted until it disappeared. There was no divine art in the world that couldn't be broken. Apart from Yu Qi-yun's exquisite death substitution art, he had many shortcomings, and his magic treasures were all destroyed in the fight with Sun Huaying. So after entering the true water light, even if there were thousands of baleful bone soldiers, it would be useless. As long as their mana wasn't as strong as Zhang Yan's. They could only linger in it until they died, unable to escape. At this time, a sword shadow suddenly appeared not far away, showing a momentum that could pierce through the blue sky. It was flying over here. Zhang Yan raised his hand and said loudly, "Is it Daoist Sun?" "Zhang Yan is here." The sword light suddenly disappeared and Sun Huaying's figure appeared. He looked back and forth. But he didn't see any trace of Yu Qi-yun. He knew that he had most likely been taken away by Zhang Yan, but he didn't care too much. Looking at the floating mirror beside Zhang Yan, he thought of the mirror light just now and asked, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, did you come here to find me?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Exactly." Sun Huaying's eyes flickered as she asked, "Is there something important?" Zhang Yan nodded and said, "You guessed right, Jinren Sun." He immediately explained the reason for his visit and finally said, "Senior Marshal Brother Hua and the others will be here soon. Please wait for a while, Jinren Sun." Sun Huaying pondered for a moment. He nodded. After waiting for 45 minutes, 5 streaks of light flew over from afar. The trio from Qinsang School and the young couple had already arrived. Hua Xian looked at the top of the cloud and saw that both Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying were unharmed. His expression relaxed slightly. He stopped the streaks of light and brought everyone to greet them. After greeting them, he went straight to the point and said, "I think Junior Marshal Brother Zhang has already told Daoist Sun the whole story, so I won't say anything unnecessary. Feng Haiyang has reached the 3rd level of Yuanying. He isn't someone any of us can deal with. We should join forces against him. What do you think, Jinren Sun?" After listening to him, Sun Huaying said calmly, "A cultivator of the 3rd level of Yuanying is indeed difficult to deal with. We should join forces." Hua Xian felt relieved when he heard her agreement. He looked around and said, "Just now, when we were on our way here, I heard from Daoist Yang and my 2 junior martial brothers that the Devil's Doctrine has the ability to see through our tracks. I've thought about it carefully. There are still people in the Devil's Doctrine. Apart from Feng Haiyang, there is also Lu Muqiu. This person is a cultivator of the Hunqing cult, so he might be able to use the supernatural powers of the 1,000-mile alluring sound and the 9 nether candle. If that's the case, I'm afraid we are all under his surveillance. Initially, we didn't have to worry about him because we have the advantage in numbers. But now, it seems that if we want to kill Feng Haiyang, we must first kill him." Luo Qingyu also said, "This person also seems to be able to use the supernatural power of teleportation. If we keep him alive, there will be endless troubles in the future." Hua Xian said in a deep voice, "I heard that when the 2 supernatural powers of the Hunqing cult are used, the cultivators can only sit on the spot and are unable to move. We can ask one of us to walk alone and act as bait. We can try to lure Feng Haiyang to attack us. At the same time, we can ask Junior Marshal Brother Zhang to use the mirror to find out where Lu Muqiu is hiding and kill him as soon as possible." Zhong Muqing said, "Then who will be the bait?" Sun Huaying said, "Why don't you let me try?" However, Hua Xian shook his head and said, "Daoist Sun is indeed a suitable candidate, but it's not good to be too suitable." Everyone thought about it and felt that it made sense. Feng Haiyang might be able to tell that they had set up a trap, so he must be able to guess their plan. Hence, they had to make him feel that they had a high chance of success. Hence, the person who would be the bait must not be too strong or too weak. If they were too strong, Feng Haiyang might not come, but if they were too weak, they might be killed before they could succeed. Sun Huaying possessed the art of killing sword. If Feng Haiyang wanted to kill him, he would not be able to do it in a short period of time. Without a high chance of success, he would not act rashly. Yang Bai and his wife were a little anxious. Qinsang School was the most powerful in this place. Since Sun Huaying could not do it, they were the most suitable ones. Hu Xian indeed had the two of them in mind. This was because he did not plan to send anyone to rescue them. If he did that, Feng Haiyang would definitely not come out. Hence, he only planned to give them a protective talisman so that they could activate the talisman and escape on their own in times of danger. Zhang Yan looked at the two of them and smiled. I have a suitable person in mind. Everyone looked over. Hu Xian asked curiously, who is it? Zhang Yan said, Elder Shen from Guangyuan sect followed me into the Star Stone this time. He does not have a deep relationship with the disciples of the other sects, and he is not on the same side as us. He does not have any powerful supernatural powers. If I were Feng Haiyang, seeing that he is alone, I would most likely look for him first. He was not purposely pushing Elder Shen into a pit of fire. Instead, he was giving him a chance. If Shen Yinfeng could take on this matter, it would be the same as giving a favor to the disciples of Shaoqing sect, Qinsang sect, and Yuanyang sect. It would greatly benefit Guangyuan sect in the future, and they would not have to be afraid of Yuxiao School coming to pick a fight with them. Moreover, this elder had the Golden Axis talisman to protect him. Although he looked dangerous, his life was not in danger. Hu Xian thought about it carefully and his eyes suddenly lit up. He felt that Elder Shen was indeed a suitable candidate. He said, if fellow Shen is willing, that would be the best. May I know where he is now? Can Junior Marshal Brother persuade him? Zhang Yan smiled and said, after Elder Shen came up to the Star Stone, he used up a lot of his vitality due to fighting with others. He is currently recuperating and will be able to meet up with us later. However, this matter involves his life. He is not a member of the 10 sects of Xianmen, and he is the only Yuanying elder in Guangyuan sect. He should not be involved in this mess, but we can't let him do it for free. When Hu Xian heard him specifically mentioning fighting with others, he was stunned at first. Then, he thought about it again and remembered that the few people from Yuxiao School had not appeared until now. He seemed to have understood something. He pondered for a while and said solemnly, Junior Marshal Brother Zhang, if Elder Shen is willing to agree, no matter if this matter succeeds or not, my Qinsang School will guarantee the safety of Guangyuan sect for 100 years. Sun Huaying said indifferently, my Shaoqing sect can also guarantee him for 100 years. Yang Bai saw that Shaoqing sect and Qinsang sect were standing in front of them, so he was happy to do them a favor. He quickly said, my Yuanyang sect is the same. Zhong Muqing frowned and said, Senior Marshal Brother Hu's arrangement is very safe, but if Feng Haiyang is not willing to come, what should we do? In the end, this plan still needed Feng Haiyang to take the bait. If he was not moved, then it would be a waste of effort. Hu Xian was silent for a while. A cold light appeared in his eyes before he said, then we will cultivate here and wait for him to take the initiative to attack. Let's see who can last until the end. In order to obtain the remaining decrees, Feng Haiyang would come looking for them sooner or later. Although this was a passive move, if he did not fall into the trap, this was the only way. The spiritual qi here was abundant, and it was not much worse than the 10 spirit caves of Donghua continent. Cultivating here could be said to be far better than cultivating in one's own cave abode. If Feng Haiyang could improve his cultivation here, they would not lose to him. By then, they would see who could improve faster. On the east side of the Star Stone, a conveyance light flew like a meteor. However, no matter how fast it flew, that wisp of pale yellow smoke still followed behind it. It was like a gangrene that could not be shaken off. Zhou Huang was helpless now. No matter where he ran, he could not escape under the mirror light. He could only run toward the direction of the mirror light based on the impression he had just now, hoping to meet up with the other disciples of the Xianmen sections. After half an hour, Zhou Huang thought to himself, if I can't find him before I run out of mana, won't I be at his mercy? After a few thoughts flashed through his mind, he hardened his heart and suddenly let out a loud shout. He no longer cherished his magic power. Instead, he operated his cultivation technique and abruptly sped up his escape light. A dazzling starlight suddenly spread out and flew away like a rainbow. As he exerted his strength, the wisp of yellow smoke also seemed to be triggered. It immediately increased its speed and chased after him. Flying at full speed like this consumed a lot of mana. After about a quarter of an hour, Zhou Huang's forehead was covered in sweat. He made a hand seal and took out the heavenly cycle square piece. In a flash, he was 10,000 feet away. He left Feng Haiyang behind and managed to put some distance between him and Feng Haiyang. Taking advantage of this gap, he took out a talisman from his sleeve and shook it lightly. Immediately, a golden boat with two upturned ends that looked like a gold ingot flew out. He flicked his sleeve and turned into a streak of light that darted into the boat and hid inside. Once he was inside the cabin, he pressed his hand on the talisman, and with a few rumbling sounds, the four walls of the golden boat were immediately propped up with circles of restrictions that flickered like stars. Soon after, he took out a jade bottle, poured out a few pills, and swallowed them. Zhou Huang sat cross-legged. With a little channeling, he dissolved the medicinal pills. He sneered to himself, "Let's see how long you can last with me." He had made up his mind to use the golden boat's restriction to fight against Feng Haiyang. Since his mana was insufficient, he could only consume medicinal pills. Even if he was trapped by the heaven and earth seal, the golden boat's restriction could at least last for 4 to 6 hours. However, he did not believe that Feng Haiyang could continue fighting with him here. The only thing he had to worry about was that Feng Haiyang had a treasure that could break the restriction. If that was the case, he could just channel the talisman and use the star stone to save his life. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.